Chapter 339. Venerable Lord Saber? Lei Dongtian was stunned for a moment and could not help but turn to look at Old Mu. Did he not remember that Old Mu had already crippled him? Old Mu was also shocked by the arrival of Venerable Lord Saber. He craned his neck. I have already crippled him. Even if he is not dead, he should not be able to fight anymore. How could he appear in this state? The next moment, second brother. Let's go. Venerable Lord Saber roared. Venerable Lord Snow trembled and spat out a mouthful of blood. Venerable Lord Saber flicked his saber with his fingers. The roar of dragons and tigers broke through the air. He laughed and said, I have never accepted anyone in my entire life. Today, I have returned to my true self. Let's go, let's go. Venerable Lord Saber laughed. With a flash of saber light in his hand, he resolutely cut his own throat. A skinny head flew up and flew towards Venerable Lord Snow. This move of Venerable Lord Saber was beyond the expectations of Lei Dongtian and his servant. This was suicide. How could such a strong force suddenly commit suicide? Just as Lei Dongtian and Old Mu were in shock, they saw another strange thing. Venerable Lord Saber's head was separated from his body. His neck was severed but not a single drop of blood flowed out. At this moment, although Venerable Lord Saber's body was headless and his senses were gone, he still seemed to be able to see as he rushed towards Lei Dongtian and Old Mu. As he rushed, the saber energy condensed. In an instant, the saber energy filled the sky. Lei Dongtian and Old Mu were at a loss of what to do when they saw this horrifying scene. They subconsciously retreated. Then, they saw the headless body of Venerable Lord Saber suddenly explode. There was a leisurely voice in the sky that seemed to come from beyond the ancient sky. Flesh and blood condense, soul sacrifice, Saber God appears, the person dies. Before the voice died away, a majestic long saber appeared. The next moment, an illusory figure appeared in the air. It was a golden deity with a height of more than 100 feet. The saber flew back to his hand. With a wave of his hand, a saber mountain appeared in midair. His height was unknown. The saber energy that filled the sky was gathered by him and turned into a saber. And this saber turned into a mountain of sabers. Then, the saber mountain collapsed. Except for a ray of light that flew backward, the rest of the saber shadows, mixed with extremely sharp saber aura, fell down on Lei Dongtian and Old Mu. The saber mountain continued to form and collapse, as if it was endless and without end. Little 5. Venerable Lord Snow let out a long howl and grabbed the saber light. Holding Venerable Lord Saber's head, he turned into a beam of white light and sped away into the distance. He ran madly all the way, howling all the way. His heart was pierced and his soul was broken. Brother. Second brother will bring you home. Home. The swiftly moving body had long disappeared from sight, but the mournful howl lingered in the night sky of Tiantang City for a long time. Lei Dongtian and Old Mu could no longer care about chasing after Venerable Lord Snow. They had nowhere to hide in the face of the Saber Mountain attack. Making a prompt decision, they roared in unison and launched the technique of body and sword as one, facing the attack head-on. Ding 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 ding. It was unknown how many times the sword light that the two of them had turned into had collided with the saber aura of the Saber Mountain, finally. With a loud cry, Lei Dongtian's body flew out like a kite with a broken string. Old Mu was only a moment behind him, flying out with his feet in front and behind his back. He was sent flying hundreds of feet away and landed on the edge of the tower. The Saber Mountain in the air was still collapsing, emitting saber light that could destroy everything. It even blocked Venerable Lord Snow's line of sight. Finally, the sound of a saber rang out. A long saber suddenly appeared in the air, gleaming with a cold light. Then, it disappeared abruptly. Silence was restored between heaven and earth. Venerable Lord Saber's body disappeared at the same time as the Saber Mountain, but there was not even a trace of flesh on the ground. All of his flesh and blood had been turned into sacrificial saber aura, unreservedly. There were 20 to 30 crisscrossing saber marks on Lei Dongtian's body, causing him to grimace in pain. Old Mu's body was also covered with saber marks, his injuries much more serious than Lei Dongtian's. Both of them panted heavily, staring at the void in front of them fiercely. However, Venerable Lord Saber was gone, and so was Venerable Lord Snow. Knowing that the battle was over, Lei Dongtian sat on the ground and continued to pant heavily. His eyes were filled with extreme resentment. Damn it! How could we let him escape? The repercussions will be far-reaching. Old Mu limped over. Young lord, this Saber Mountain should be the last resort of Venerable Lord Saber using all of his vitality. Although it is not enough to kill us, it is enough to stop us. What kind of trick is this? Old Mu was bewildered. He clearly remembered that he had already destroyed all the meridians of Venerable Lord Saber. How could such a thing happen? Lei Dongtian's body moved, affecting the wounds on his body. He could not help but let out a muffled groan. Both of them had a profound cultivation base. Although there were many wounds on their bodies, most of them were flesh wounds. None of them were critical. Their lives were not in danger, and they even had the strength to fight again. However, the target of the battle was gone. I seem to have heard of such a trick before. Lei Dongtian's eyes flickered as he gasped, This is, his gaze suddenly froze. His mouth was half open, as if he had turned into a statue. Young lord? Young lord? Old Mu was shocked. I remember now. Lei Dongtian suddenly jumped up. The wounds on his body were torn open, but he seemed to feel nothing. His eyes were fixed as he said, The bone of the Saber God. So it is the bone of the Saber God. It really lives up to its reputation. Old Mu's eyes widened. The bone of the Saber God? What is that? Lei Dongtian did not seem to hear Old Mu's question. His spirit was now in extreme shock and excitement. His eyes were fixed on the void. I should have thought of it earlier. So this is it, the bone of the Saber God. The bone of the Saber God really exists. The Four Seasons Tower is getting more and more complicated. Someone who has comprehended the fief territory as a heaven realm, and there's even the bone of the Saber God. Yes, since there's the bone of the Saber God, there's the bone of the Snow God. No wonder he can comprehend the power of the fief territory when he's only in the heaven realm. I see. Old Mu was confused. What is the bone of the Saber God? Can you explain a little before you sigh? Lei Dongtian finally recovered and sucked in a breath of cold air. Treat the wounds first. I'll tell you the details later. To the residents of Yun. Yun Yang glanced at the two heavily injured men who were covered in wounds and blood. He suddenly exclaimed in shock, Brother. Brother Lei? Lei Dongtian sighed tiredly. Brother Yun. I'm ashamed, how did it end up like this? Yin Yang cried out in shock, Someone, quick, bring some ointment, healing medicine. Someone, help him in first, he called out repeatedly. Lei Dongtian struggled to steady himself and said, There's no need to trouble yourself. We have all these medicine. Just find us a quiet room. Send someone to look at the wounds on our backs. All right. Quick. Yin Yang's face was solemn. Brother Lei, you. Sigh. What kind of person is so cruel? This young brother. Sigh. Oh my God. Why are there so many wounds? Lei Dongtian and his companion were in agony, but Yun Yang seemed to be fine. He did not find anything unusual. At this moment, perhaps those who knew Yun Yang the best would know that Yun Yang's face was pale and his body seemed to be trembling slightly. He was already trying his best to hold on. Even the light in his eyes had dimmed a lot. Yun Yang's effort in framing them just now was not small at all. He was so close to being cut down. Like Lei Dongtian and the other man, Yun Yang was also covered in wounds. His dantian was close to being depleted. However, his face was still smiling and there was nothing unusual about him. In the room, Lei Dongtian and his companion seemed to be badly injured, with almost no part of their body that was not injured at all. After applying medicine, consuming medicinal pills, and bandaging their wounds, both of them looked very presentable. They were in good condition and were even in high spirits. It's fortunate that Brother Yun is here, giving us a place to rest at ease. Lei Dongtian was extremely thankful. It's fortunate that we listened to Brother Yun that day. Otherwise, I'm afraid that today's battle. Even if we don't die, more physical pain would be unavoidable. Yin Yang busied himself with the task, issuing orders continuously. He ordered Lao Mei and Bai Yishue, who was disguised as a guard and had a dark face that was frighteningly ugly, to run around in circles. Lei Dongtian was inexplicably touched as he watched. My injuries this time have made my brother Yun anxious and frightened. He cares too much about me. His concern is messed up, but his heart is sincere. With such a brother, what more could I ask for in this life? In the long run, it would definitely be twice the result with half the effort to cultivate with this brother. The situation this time was really unexpected. We had the upper hand and controlled the whole situation. Lei Dongtian sighed. I didn't expect the opponent to have an ultimate move. Yin Yang said worriedly, don't worry about the ultimate move. Brother Lei, you'd better recruit people from your family quickly. It's not that I jinxed it. The ability that the Four Seasons Tower has shown so far is only the tip of the iceberg. It's far from their full strength. I'm really worried. Brother Lei, you and I treat each other with sincerity. I really don't want to see you, Halfway through his sentence, Yin Yang seemed to feel that it was inauspicious, so he did not continue. Lei Dongtian comforted him, don't worry, brother. This time, we were caught off guard, that's why we fell into their trap. The next time we meet, even if they use a more powerful move, I still have a way to deal with it. Being careless once is already too many times. How can I repeat the same mistake? Speaking of which, we've really underestimated the Four Seasons Tower's foundation this time, so much so that we didn't make full preparations. Lei Dongtian was extremely annoyed. I didn't even wear the celestial stellar garment. I'm really too careless. Old Mu rolled his eyes. Indeed, he was too careless. You have a precious garment that is impenetrable and impervious to fire and water, but you didn't wear it. Don't blame me for not protecting you well enough. With my injuries that are more serious than yours, I can't say that I didn't protect you well enough. Seeing that both of them were still in good spirits, Yin Yang seemed to finally be relieved. He heaved a sigh of relief and said, it's good that you're all right. The situation just now really scared me to death. Chapter 340. The name of the previous chapter is wrong. I have contacted the editor to change it. This chapter will be in the normal order. Yin Yang laughed and said, Brother Lei, what kind of ultimate move did the other party use? How come even a peerless expert like Brother Lei couldn't avoid being injured? Lei Dongtian pondered for a while and decided to tell Yin Yang everything. He said, I did not expect Venerable Lord Saber to have the bone of the Saber God. Yin Yang was stunned. What? The bone of the Saber God? Lei Dongtian's eyes were filled with admiration. This is a really good thing. Yin Yang asked humbly, the bone of the Saber God? A piece of bone? Lei Dongtian laughed and said, you can't say that what you said is completely wrong. How should I put it? Don't rush. Let me explain it to you and broaden your horizons. Now, Lei Dongtian felt that he and Yin Yang were a pair of brothers who would go through life and death together. It was a true bond of life and death. There was no secret that could not be shared. This was because it could accelerate the development of their relationship. Although he had to destroy his brother in the end, Lei Dongtian felt that as long as they were together, even if he destroyed Yin Yang one day, he would remember for the rest of his life that there was once a brother who was good to him wholeheartedly. According to the ancient legend, there used to be a deity in this world. Lei Dongtian said, and the deity would leave behind his legacy before he ascended. Yin Yang listened to Lei Dongtian's description with a serious expression. Yin Yang had never heard of the rumor that Lei Dongtian mentioned. It should be a secret that had been passed down in the bound of universe. There was more than one deity like this. There were many deities. What's more, among these deities, there were a few who were brothers and close friends. Lei Dongtian said. Many deities? Close friends? That's something new. Yin Yang was surprised to hear this. Yin Yang did not doubt the deities that Lei Dongtian mentioned. Just like the secular cultivators in Tianxian continent, a cultivator who had achieved 10th perfection was probably the peak of this world. However, in the eyes of super sects like School of Spring and Autumn, perfected 10th perfection was only at the peak of peak realm. They only had 1 foot in heaven realm, which was even higher. Lei Dongtian, the young master of a great family in the bound of universe, was naturally more knowledgeable. The deity he mentioned should be the peak cultivators in the bound of universe. The so-called ascension was probably the process of ascending to a higher realm. If the peak cultivators in the bound of universe were to be placed in the Tianxian continent, it would be a waste to call them deities. It did not match their status and strength. What really surprised Yin Yang was the latter half of what Lei Dongtian had said. The path of cultivation had always been bumpy, and it was already a great blessing for cultivators to have 1 or 2 confidants. However, the origin of the legend that Lei Dongtian had mentioned was that there were many pinnacle cultivators who were close friends who had ascended together and even ascended successfully. It was a little unbelievable. After those gods left, the entire continent underwent a very shocking and enormous change in a very short period of time. Lei Dongtian said, everything on the continent, including the one we have now, came into being after that incident. It was also because of that incident that many mysterious places appeared on the continent that were difficult for humans to reach, including mountains that no one could climb, seas that no one could cross, and even more mysterious places. These were things that originally didn't exist. The cultivators in the world had been working hard to find the whereabouts of the heritage left behind by the gods. After an unknown number of years, there were finally 12 people who found the heritage of one of the gods. These 12 people were a team, known as an adventurer team at that time. They were close to each other, as close as brothers. However, even with such an emotional foundation, when they found the heritage this time, each of them had different thoughts. No one knows the specific process, but in the end, they quarreled and turned against each other. From then on, they were divided into 2 groups. The 2 groups of people have similar battle strength. If they were to really fight each other, both sides would suffer great losses in the end, or even die. Furthermore, they also discovered that this god's inheritance is extremely profound. It's not something that an ordinary person can easily inherit. There's more than one cultivation technique in the inheritance. If all these cultivation techniques were given to one person to cultivate, that person would definitely not be able to achieve anything. For example, if a person's body had sword bones, cultivating the way of the sword would naturally yield twice the result with half the effort. However, if he were to cultivate the way of the saber at the same time, not only would it be difficult for him to master the way of the saber, even the way of the sword that he should be able to master would be greatly discounted. As for the supreme class cultivation methods that they had obtained, there were a total of 12 types in the heritage. Both groups were very fortunate that the supreme class cultivation methods happened to be equal to the number of people they had, so there was no need to fight anymore. Both groups took away 6 cultivation methods each. This experience allowed these 12 people to obtain a rare opportunity, but it also caused a crack in their friendship that could never be mended. I don't know if I should be happy or sad about it. Yin Yang's thoughts raced as he asked, what happened to these 2 groups of people? Did they achieve great mastery of their skills and intend to dominate the world? Did they go to extremes to compete with each other? This was the most normal and logical scenario. Yin Yang had even speculated about the aftermath, such as the 12 people's cultivation methods restraining each other, one person restraining another, and another person restraining another. In the end, there were only 2 people left out of the 12 and a final battle ensued. The loser would be sent to the underworld while the winner. Although the winner was victorious, he would sigh and reflect on himself, regretting that he should not have killed so many good brothers and friends for the cultivation methods. It was all a trap. Lei Dongtian chuckled as he listened to Yun Yang's question. The subsequent development of the matter was very interesting, a tale that could even be told. The 2 groups parted ways and cultivated the cultivation methods that they had obtained. After they started cultivating, they realized that the cultivation methods that they had obtained were actually not suitable for them to cultivate. This was because the suitable cultivation methods were in the hands of the other group. However, they had already fallen out. For a period of time after that, both parties were very regretful, so they thought of ways to eliminate the animosity and restore their friendship. Of course, there were many twists and turns, but in the end, the 12 people gathered again and took out the 12 cultivation methods. 12 brothers, each of them chose the one that was most suitable for their physique. Lei Dongtian narrated slowly. Yin Yang could not help but exclaim in admiration, super experts indeed, with a broad mind. They had already parted ways, but they could still share everything in the end. Although there was an element of selfishness, it's not something that an ordinary person could do. It's indeed a tale to be told. Lei Dongtian said, "You're right. In the face of such temptation, it's normal to be a little selfish. No matter how many twists and turns there were, it's already commendable that they could finally sit down and share their gains with each other." Yin Yang nodded in agreement, but he could not help but think of his 8 brothers. He thought of the eldest, Supreme Earth, fishing for supreme water through the night. A sense of pride rose in his heart subconsciously. If it were the 9 of us who had found the inheritors, such a situation would never have happened. Not even the little bit of filth in the beginning would have appeared. We would only give in to each other from the beginning, then take what we needed, promote and inspire each other, and continue to work hard together. We would share blessings and sorrows together, never forsaking each other, never giving up on each other. Separation and reunion would never happen. These 12 people each obtained a suitable cultivation method and cultivated it all the way. Finally, they achieved the cultivation method and became the legend of Tianxian continent's cultivators. They became the 12 celestial beings. Lei Dongtian's voice was thick with admiration. Invincible and unbreakable. But, it was also at this time that they regretted it again, Lei Dongtian said. Why? Why do you say so? Haven't they already reached the pinnacle of this world's cultivators? Yin Yang asked. Becoming a celestial being is the pinnacle of this world, but it's not the end of the cultivation journey. The end of this world is to become a god and ascend to a higher realm. However, they realized that no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't take another step forward, to break through the barrier of the void and become a true god. Yin Yang said, "This can't be right. Didn't they obtain the god's inheritance? Why couldn't they achieve the final step? Could it be that all 12 of them had a backup plan and concealed the key point of the cultivation method they obtained?" Lei Dongtian said, "It's not that ridiculous. Besides, there were some who coincidentally obtained a cultivation method that suited them. They wouldn't have a backup plan for themselves, would they? The real reason why they couldn't take the final step was actually because of the time when they parted ways, when the brothers turned against each other." Yin Yang was surprised again, obviously not knowing where this was coming from. He waited quietly for Lei Dongtian to continue. "Do you still remember that among the ascended gods, there are some gods who value their friends and friendship very much? And the original owner of the inheritance that they inherited cherished the most in his life was brotherly love. And the inheritance that was passed down also requires brothers who treat each other with sincerity to practice at the same time. Only then can they reach the peak together." Although the 12 of them reconciled later on, the rift that had once appeared was a demon in each of their hearts that couldn't be erased. It's hard to mend a broken mirror, it's hard to retrieve what's spilled. Therefore, although they cultivated their cultivation method to the pinnacle, they couldn't take the final step. It was because of that time when the brothers turned against each other that there was a flaw in their state of mind. If they were to forcefully break through, their cultivation method would only backfire and they would self-destruct. After the 12 celestial beings saw through this, they were filled with regret. However, there was no turning back then, and there was no turning back. Although they cultivated to the pinnacle and could even flatten mountains and rivers with a single move, they could only be earth immortals. They couldn't take another step forward and had no hope of achieving Tao. After that, although they had a long lifespan, they couldn't endure the passage of time. Finally, after many years, they passed away one by one. Chapter 341. Although the descendants of the 12 families were devastated by the death of their ancestors, they still followed their wishes and buried the bodies of the 12 ancestors together. However, many years later, the martial world was in chaos. A peerless genius used the power of the stars to set up a heavenly cycle formation, triggering the earth meridians and causing an earthquake, destroying the graves of the 12 celestial beings. The remains of the 12 celestial beings were torn apart and scattered everywhere because of this incident. The so-called indestructible Vajra was not eternal after all. Later on, someone discovered that although the bodies of the celestial beings were not indestructible, the bones of each celestial being were indeed immortal. Every piece of bone contained the power of the celestial being when he was alive. Once the celestial being's bones were all activated, the legacy of the celestial being could be recreated, and even the complete cultivation base of the celestial being. What was lacking was the method and means to activate the celestial being's power. As people continued to explore and experiment, they finally found a way to transplant the celestial being's bones directly into a person's body, replacing the original part of the person's bones. Then, as long as the person gets used to it and gets used to constantly emitting the celestial being's chi, he can use it to change himself. When a certain level is reached, he can naturally transform into a strong person. This is only the first step. Some people thought that if only a part of the celestial being's bones could have such power, if all the celestial being's bones could be gathered, the complete legacy of the celestial being should be obtained. At least, the cultivation base would be equivalent to the celestial being's own level. This idea is extremely bold, complicated and precise, but one has to admit that the possibility is extremely high. Many people have tried this method, but all of them were rumors of failure. There were very few successful examples. In the end, the celestial being's bones were finally scattered somewhere. Until now, this ancient legend has disappeared for thousands of years. Lei Dongtian could not help but feel a sense of superiority as he looked at the people who were listening attentively. They did not know about these things. He continued, the bone of the saber god that I mentioned earlier refers to the remains of the saber god of the 12 celestial beings. Not only does the Four Seasons Tower's Venerable Lord Saber have the bone of the saber god. I believe that Venerable Lord Snow, who obviously has the ability to control snowflakes, has a high chance of possessing the bone of the snow god. No, Venerable Lord Snow must have the bone of the snow god on him. Otherwise, it would be impossible to explain how he could release a territory with that little cultivation base. So, the Four Seasons Tower's true objective is actually here. Moreover, he has been silently planning it. After so many years, I wonder how many celestial beings' remains have been successfully collected. Also, I can guess the reason why the Four Seasons Tower is targeting me. Lei Dongtian snorted coldly and murmured, but, how did the Four Seasons Tower know that the Lei family possesses the bone of Thunder God? No wonder you wanted me to hand over my clan's cultivation technique. Humph. He then snorted coldly and said, the King Four Seasons Tower, what wishful thinking you have. What a wild ambition, what wishful thinking. As he spoke, he was suddenly filled with resentment as he bellowed, how dare the Four Seasons Tower act so recklessly, going against the Lei family so brazenly. How audacious of them to seek their own death. Yin Yang was dumbfounded. Obviously, he, the initiator, had not expected such a change to occur. The bone of the 12 celestial beings? The bone of the thunder god? The bone of the saber god? The bone of the snow god? What was this all about? Yin-Yang felt that the amount of information he had absorbed was too much, that he could not wrap his head around it. What was this all about? Such a plot development was so coincidental that even a novel would not dare to write it like this. What kind of twist was this? Deity variation? However, Lei Dongtian's narration made him feel good about himself and was even more pretentious. It was as if everything was within expectations and within reason, everything was so natural and logical. Instead, it made Yin-Yang, the mastermind behind the scenes, feel like he was lost in the clouds. There were still many key points in this legend that he had not explained clearly at all. However, Yin-Yang was also clear that Lei Dongtian would never tell him all the details of such a legend. After all, this was a big secret that was related to becoming invincible in the world and becoming a saint. The fact that Lei Dongtian was able to say all this meant that Yin-Yang's efforts were not wasted. It was even based on Lei Dongtian's confidence that he could subdue him at any time and that Yin-Yang was only an ant in his hands. However, Yin-Yang did not expect that not only did he intentionally plant flowers all over the sky, the willow that he planted unintentionally seemed to have grown into a shade as well. This was a pleasant surprise and he was overjoyed. Of course, this joy could not be expressed right now. After all, it was in front of Lei Dongtian. Brother Lei, you need to watch your words. Yin-Yang said, touched. Of course, I feel honored to share such a big secret with this young brother, but I am also wary. You must know that walls have ears. If such a secret were to be heard by others, it would be very disadvantageous to you, Brother Lei. I understand. Lei Dongtian patted Yin-Yang's shoulder in gratitude and said, Brother, Lei Dongtian, will always remember your sincerity towards me. Yin-Yang nodded and said with righteous indignation, I really didn't know that the Four Seasons Tower actually had such a scheme. How sinister. What's more, their scheme is so huge that even a reclusive family like Brother Lei's is part of it. The celestial being's bone has been scattered and its whereabouts are unknown. Since it has been thousands of years, I believe that Brother Lei's family must have had this bone for a long time. It is indeed a family heirloom, but the Four Seasons Tower actually wants to lay their hands on it. It is truly insane and despicable. Lei Dongtian was even more enraged as he said, this bunch of bastards from the Four Seasons Tower first kidnapped my fiancé and now openly coveted my family's heirloom. Even if I were to be hacked into pieces, it would not be enough to quench the hatred in my heart. I must annihilate this insolent trash. Yin-Yang pondered for a moment before speaking again, there's another strange thing about this matter. How confidential is Brother Lei's family heirloom? Such news should be guarded and guarded with extreme caution. Even the elders in the family might not know about it. I wonder, how did the Four Seasons Tower find out about it? Lei Dongtian's face was dark as he said coldly, do you even need to ask? It must be those who don't want my family to benefit from it. The news was leaked. You're right, there must be a traitor within the Lei family who betrayed the family. Otherwise, why would the secret be leaked for no reason? In short, this matter is of great importance. We must not let it go easily. Yin-Yang looked worried as he said, Brother Lei is alone out there now, all alone. It's best to be careful. Since the Four Seasons Tower has such a plan, it must have been planned for a long time. Brother Lei, I feel that there are many dangers ahead, coming one after another. If there's any carelessness, I'm afraid we'll be doomed eternally. In my opinion, it's better for Brother Lei to return to the family and discuss the countermeasures before we talk about the next step. There's no need for that. Lei Dongtian snorted and said with great ambition, the incident this time is due to my lack of vigilance and carelessness. It's absolutely impossible for someone like Venerable Lord Snow to harm me in the future. Besides, although there are dangers ahead, it could also be an unparalleled opportunity for the Lei family. A crisis may not be a bad opportunity. A dark smile appeared on Lei Dongtian's face as he said faintly, as the saying goes, the slightest clue reveals the general trend. The Four Seasons Tower definitely has more than one or two pieces of celestial beings' bones, and definitely more than one or two people have them. Let's not talk about anything else. If Venerable Lord Saber and Venerable Lord Snow have celestial beings' bones, then the other 3 venerable lords who share the same fame as them should also have celestial beings' bones. There's also the head of the 4 Seasons Tower, Mr. Nyen. He should also have celestial beings' bones, perhaps more than 1 or 2 pieces. I've been investigating the 4 Seasons Tower these days. The 4 Seasons Tower has been established in the Tianxian continent for countless years, subduing the world by force and bathing the martial world in blood. Why did they bathe the martial world in blood? Humph. Lei Dongtian realized this point and could not help but snort coldly. It must be because of this. Humph. Yin Yang was dumbfounded. Was this even possible? If I could get my hands on these, Lei Dongtian took a deep breath and suddenly had a whimsical thought. His eyes were gleaming as he said, then I, Lei Dongtian, would be the greatest contributor to the Lei family in the past thousands of years. Even if all the contributions of all the ancestors were added up, they would not be as great as me alone. When my father gave me a name back then, he once said, "A thunder moves the 9 heavens." He really had foresight. It turned out to be a prophecy. I must complete this task alone. Only then can I truly live up to the name that my father gave me. Thunder moves the 9 heavens. As Lei Dongtian spoke, he suddenly burst into laughter. However, if I want to complete this task, I still need to rely on Brother Yun's help. I will definitely reward you handsomely after this is done. Lei Dongtian said seriously. His attitude was sincere and sincere. Yin Yang could not feel the slightest hint of hypocrisy. It was all from the bottom of his heart, from the bottom of his heart. What are you talking about, Brother Lei? How can there be any reliance between us brothers? Yin Yang patted his chest and said righteously, your matter is my matter. This young brother will do his best from now on, even if I have to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a pot of boiling oil, I will not hesitate to risk my life. I will do my best to help my brother complete this great undertaking and create a new legend. Chapter 342. It's still the same thing, who are we to each other? Yin Yang chuckled. Brother Lei and Elder Mu recuperate in peace. I'll collect all the relevant news from the outside world. I'm sorry to say this, but this is what I can really contribute to. Lei Dongtian nodded and said with a sigh, before this trip, I really didn't expect that I could cultivate the 7 emotions praxis and have such a beautiful wife. What's more, there's the shocking news of the 4 Seasons Tower's celestial being's bone. What's even rarer is that I've made such a good friend, a good brother like Brother Yun. God has been so kind to me, so kind to me. Yin Yang sighed as well and said, I didn't expect it either. When I first met Brother Lei, I thought that Brother Lei was hard to get close to and difficult to get along with. Who knew that after getting to know Brother Lei for some time, we're actually so congenial and straightforward? It's a blessing for this young brother to know Brother Lei, it's enough in this life. Both of them looked at each other and guffawed as if they had found each other's bosom buddies. Their laughter was filled with sincerity, and they shared the same interests. What more can a man ask for when he has a bosom friend in life? Lei Dongtian sighed with a smile. That's right, it's rare to have a chicken in one's life. Yin Yang sighed as well, his feelings growing more sincere. Brother Lei, I feel that the brotherly bond between this young brother and my elder brother, to put it in an inauspicious way, can last until death. Lei Dongtian nodded. That's right, that's right. Brotherly bond, until death. Beside him, Bai Shue and Old Mu felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Old Mu felt that his young master seemed to have lost his composure. More importantly, it was a little exaggerated. This was obviously the type where true feelings had been stirred because the young master's words were too mushy. Bai Shue, on the other hand, had another realization. Motherf ****. This Lei fellow will definitely be worse off than me in the future, much worse. Didn't he hear Young Yun say that his target is death? However, it would be a great joy in life to be able to see how this bastard is tricked to death with his own eyes. Sigh, Yin Yang's ability to deceive others is getting better and better. I'm truly impressed and impressed. To think that I, Baishua, prided myself on my intelligence, had been duped from the first time we met, all the way to becoming a guard, the kind of guard who couldn't even pee freely. It wasn't without reason. Baishua was utterly convinced by the young man's deception today. This was a peerless super talent in this world. On the other side, the Four Seasons Tower had already begun to move. It was to subdue the world by force and bathe the martial world in blood. On this day, School of Spring and Autumn. The disciples were doing their morning classes step by step. In front of the mountain gate of the sect encampment, clouds and mist lingered, and it was quiet and peaceful as usual. It showed the worldly affairs and the heavenly palace. Some of the disciples were exchanging blows with each other, some were meditating, some were going out to look for food ingredients, and some were starting to play tricks. The higher-ups of the sect were all in seclusion, trying to break through. It was a scene of prosperity. Suddenly, there seemed to be a flash of light from afar. The disciples who saw it in front of the mountain gate thought that they were seeing things. They looked at it suspiciously and immediately turned their heads away. They continued to chat and laugh, not taking the abnormality seriously or taking it to heart. However, at the very next moment, a grand sword light suddenly descended from above the layer of clouds, and its momentum was vigorous and unstoppable, shocking everyone present. A sharp voice that was laced with sword energy suddenly rang in everyone's ears. The School of Spring and Autumn is renowned for its experts, but I wonder if the school's sturdiness can withstand a single strike of my sword? The voice was still lingering in the ears of the School of Spring and Autumn's disciples when a ray of sword light shot out like the sun and arrived before the mountain gate. With a loud boom, the sword energy soared into the sky and shot in all directions. The 8 disciples on duty at the School of Spring and Autumn's mountain gate were the first to bear the brunt of the attack. They did not even manage to utter a word before they turned into a cloud of blood mist, drifting in the air. As for the grand gate of the School of Spring and Autumn, after a loud bang, it completely turned into powder and scattered on the ground. For a moment, the sky was filled with dust. In the midst of the blood mist and dust, a man in white, who was like an unsheathed sword, walked into the School of Spring and Autumn's gate leisurely with his hands behind his back. He said lightly, "The famous School of Spring and Autumn can't even withstand a single strike of my sword. What's the point of keeping such a school? What's the point of leaving?" Inside, the disciples of the School of Spring and Autumn were frightened by the sudden change and scattered in all directions. However, there was still the sound of an alarm bell, sounding melodiously. This is bad. Someone broke into the mountain and destroyed the school gate in one move. Someone is killing their way in. The 8 disciples who were on duty have all been killed. This person is an expert. Quickly inform the elders. This is bad. It was a scene of chaos. The man in white was dressed in plain clothes, only the black hilt of his sword could be seen on his shoulder. He looked at the chaos in the School of Spring and Autumn indifferently, squinting his eyes as he said faintly, "Just a bunch of unruly people, only useful in polluting the name of the top 10 ancient sections." Suddenly, he raised his voice and said, "Those old fellows of the School of Spring and Autumn who can take a beating, come out and offer a sacrifice to the sword." Swoosh, 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 amidst the thick smoke and dust, countless silhouettes suddenly flew out from all directions. The one leading them was an elder in long robes. With a solemn expression, he waved his hand and said loudly, "Everyone, calm down. Stop." With a loud shout, the chaotic scene immediately calmed down. The panicking disciples of the School of Spring and Autumn seemed to have found a pillar to take charge of them. Gradually, they moved orderly and returned to their respective positions, carrying out their duties. Seeing that the school had calmed down, the elder stepped out from the crowd and stared at the man in white. He said cautiously, "Venerable Lord Sword of the Four Seasons Tower, why have you come to the School of Spring and Autumn to behave so atrociously? We've always minded our own business and never interfered with each other. I wonder how our school has offended the Four Seasons Tower. Why did you draw your sword and kill as soon as you came, destroying my school and slaughtering my disciples?" Venerable Lord Sword said coldly, I have my reasons for coming here to kill. I am only giving you a light punishment now. If the School of Spring and Autumn can't give me an explanation, then it won't just be a matter of killing a few of your disciples. He smirked coldly and said faintly, who knows, the once prosperous School of Spring and Autumn will be removed from the Tianxian continent from today onwards. His tone was indifferent, but the meaning behind his words was eerily sinister. The elder's pupils shrunk as a mocking smirk hung at the corner of his lips. He said faintly, you, Venerable Lord Sword, don't seem to have the capability to remove the School of Spring and Autumn. Venerable Lord Sword said, whether I have the capability or not, it all depends on how you do it. Is this explanation satisfactory to me? If it doesn't satisfy me, then you'll see immediately whether I have the capability or not. May I ask what the reason is? The elder was enraged as he said sternly, Venerable Lord Sword, speak. Venerable Lord Sword stood quietly, his eyes like a dormant venomous snake as he stared at the elder opposite him. Suddenly, the long sword that had been quietly in its scabbard behind his shoulder rang with a clang, and left its scabbard by half a foot. The cold gleam shone brightly. The sword light chilled the School of Spring and Autumn. The chilling murderous intent gushed out like a tidal wave. Everyone on the spot felt chills run down their spines, clearly feeling the sword light slashing across their naked skin. Venerable Lord Sword smiled coldly, your school's disciples have participated in the concourse of the underworld's assassination of my Four Seasons Tower's Supreme Lord Springfrost and have contributed greatly in this battle. I wonder, what is the reason? What is the reason? Please give me an explanation. Help the concourse of the underworld? Assassinate Supreme Lord Springfrost? The elder was dumbfounded. Why would we assassinate your Supreme Lord Springfrost? When did this happen? We've never done such a thing. As for joining forces with the concourse of the underworld, that's even more absurd and non-existent. Good and evil cannot coexist, how can we join forces? Venerable Lord Sword's eyes were half-lidded as he said lightly, I'm not here to ask if you have it or not, I'm only here to ask for an explanation. If you can't provide me with one, then the Four Seasons Tower's subjugation of the world by force and the bloodbath of the martial world will start from the School of Spring and Autumn. The grace I've given you is very limited, there are only two options, yes or no. At this time, an old voice spoke proudly, Venerable Lord Sword is truly magnanimous and magnanimous. The School of Spring and Autumn was almost touched by Venerable Lord Sword's generosity. Hee hee. Venerable Lord Sword said faintly, you should have come out long ago. So what if you've come out? Can you change the outcome? With a sneer, a handsome middle-aged man appeared at the mountain gate. His eyes were trained on Venerable Lord Sword as he sneered, it's been years and Venerable Lord Sword is still as aggressive as ever. You don't give in. Venerable Lord Sword said, indeed, it's been years since we last met. Shoutingkong is still as elegant as ever, still as idiotic as ever. Shoutingkong smiled, not angered by the insolence of the newcomer. He said, Venerable Lord Sword, since you're here, you're a guest. It's better to make things clear first. If there's any misunderstanding, I'm afraid that Venerable Lord Sword and the Four Seasons Tower will have to answer to my disciples who died under Venerable Lord Sword's sword. Similarly, if our disciples have offended the Four Seasons Tower, we won't tolerate it. Don't let it go unjustly. This sounds more like what a human would say. Venerable Lord Sword said, your school has a disciple named Wei Xinglu. The world is dangerous, it's difficult to walk the path ahead. What an unlucky name. Listening to Venerable Lord Sword mentioning the target's name, the School of Spring and Autumn fell into an eerie silence. Shoutingkong's pupils shrunk as he asked in a low voice, how is it? Venerable Lord Sword said, it was Wei Xinglu who stopped Supreme Lord Springfrost and caused Supreme Lord Springfrost's death. The evidence is conclusive. If there's any doubt, you can call him out for a confrontation. Wei Xinglu. Chapter 343. Shoutingkong knew that Venerable Lord Sword's words were true, but his attitude suddenly hardened when he heard Wei Xinglu's name. He said faintly, I believe what Venerable Lord Sword has said, but Wei Xinglu is my school's disciple. No matter what he has done, he must be punished by the School of Spring and Autumn. It is not the Four Seasons Tower's turn to dictate and overstep their bounds. He looked at Venerable Lord Sword coldly and said faintly, Venerable Lord Sword has come to the School of Spring and Autumn to punish my disciple. You think too highly of yourself. Venerable Lord Sword was caught off guard. He had thought of many ways the other party would respond, but he had never thought that the other party would be so unyielding. After his arrival, the School of Spring and Autumn was obviously wary of the Four Seasons Tower's revenge. That was why he could suppress the entire place with his aura, but it was not his ability that could suppress the entire School of Spring and Autumn. It was just that the higher-ups of the school did not want the conflict to escalate. After Shoutingcomb's arrival, the attitudes of both parties became more relaxed. Venerable Lord Sword felt that this would most likely end peacefully. Although he was confident in his ability, the School of Spring and Autumn was still one of the top 10 ancient sects of the Tianxian continent. It was risky to go against them head-on. If both parties were to ease up, the situation could be salvaged. However, once Wei Xinglu's name was mentioned, the attitude of everyone in the School of Spring and Autumn changed in an instant. The change was beyond imagination. It was difficult to adapt to the sudden harshness. Venerable Lord Sword instinctively felt that Wei Xinglu's identity was unusual. However, it was impossible to back down now. If he were to retreat, it would be even more humiliating. Moreover, the Four Seasons Tower had never been afraid of anyone. Venerable Lord Sword straightened his body, his eyes gleaming as he said faintly, if so, the School of Spring and Autumn shall be the first stop of the Four Seasons Tower's bloodbath in the martial world. Subdue the world by force, bloodbath in the martial world. From the scabbard on his shoulder, a dragon's roar could be heard. A sword suddenly popped out and hovered in the air. The tip of the sword was gleaming with a cold gleam as it was aimed at the people of the School of Spring and Autumn. If you want to fight, then fight. So much nonsense. Shoutingcomb said sternly, the School of Spring and Autumn is not a group that can be bullied. With a clang, dozens of disciples from the School of Spring and Autumn drew their swords in unison. Set up the sword formation and welcome the distinguished guests. With that shout, the alarm within the School of Spring and Autumn rang again and did not stop for a long time. Many figures rushed down from the various mountains like meteors chasing after the moon. An old voice spoke, the School of Spring and Autumn has stood strong for a long time. Let's see what the Four Seasons Tower can do to wash our school in blood. Take down Venerable Lord Sword. I'll bring him to Mr. Nian later. I'd like to ask him if the Four Seasons Tower is really going to turn the world upside down. However, what responded to him was a sky-piercing sword energy. Venerable Lord Sword let out a long howl, his murderous aura filling the air in the front mountain of the School of Spring and Autumn as he hollered, kill. At the same time, the concourse of the underworld's base, Hell Valley, had turned into a bloodbath. The Four Seasons Tower's Venerable Lord Ice and Venerable Lord Frost, along with a dozen other superb experts, charged towards the concourse of the underworld's headquarters. Without a word, both sides started fighting. The 10 great kings of the concourse of the underworld appeared at the same time to meet the enemy. At the same time, the gold-ranked assassins of the concourse of the underworld appeared at the right time, displaying their elusive skills. The battle raged on, unprecedentedly brutal. In the martial world, the Four Seasons Tower had made its move as well. The Green Knights, the Red Knights, the Yellow Knights, and the White Knights had appeared in the martial world at the same time from different directions, slaughtering those who dared to go against the Four Seasons Tower or even those who disobeyed them in secret. They pushed their way through, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. The Four Seasons Knights of Spring, Summer, Autumn, and Winter, who had not appeared in the martial world for a long time and had almost become legends, had reappeared in the world once again. On the first day of the Four Seasons Tower subduing the world by force and washing the martial world in blood, flowers bloomed everywhere as they gained the upper hand. Only Venerable Lord Sword's side was slightly less successful. It was not that Venerable Lord Sword had lost or suffered a setback, but the battle had formed a rather unique atmosphere. Venerable Lord Sword had sealed the gates of the School of Spring and Autumn with his own strength. His sword light crisscrossed, shielding the entire space. He had not been able to enter the school and start a massacre. However, with him here, it was equivalent to one man holding the pass against 10,000 men. It was undoubtedly as difficult as ascending to heaven for the School of Spring and Autumn's men to charge out. Venerable Lord Sword did not feel it was a pity that he could not charge in and start a massacre. He knew very well the School of Spring and Autumn's true capability. Those old fellows had yet to show themselves. Of course, he had his trump card that he had yet to use. Both sides were on high alert, not daring to act rashly. Therefore, this would be a long battle. To Venerable Lord Sword, all he wanted was the final result of victory. Now, it seemed that he was only blocking the School of Spring and Autumn's door, unable to achieve further results and only able to establish his dominance. However, this was enough to establish his authority. What was the School of Spring and Autumn? It was one of the top 10 ancient sects of the Tianxian continent that had been passed down for countless years. The Four Seasons Tower alone was enough to block the school's door, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. This was already a great deterrent. It was enough to show off to the entire martial world. This achievement was enough. In the air, divine senses were roaming, lingering, and moving. They were obviously paying attention to the school's situation. Even a single strand of divine sense was powerful and vast. Venerable Lord Sword knew that many of the School of Spring and Autumn's elders were paying attention to the situation here. As for the reason, Venerable Lord Sword knew very well. Righteous sects like to do this, Yi Zichen said. Venerable Lord Sword sneered inwardly, you want to use me as a whetstone. I shall help you grind it. Don't feel bad if you really grind the blade to pieces. It's just that at the final stage, they'll have to come out and fight. Venerable Lord Sword knew what to do. As long as the two old fellows from the School of Spring and Autumn did not fight personally, he would not lose. Even if the two old fellows came out, he could leave and fight as he wished. It would not be difficult for him to escape unscathed. The 18 School of Spring and Autumn disciples arranged themselves into a sword formation, defending against Venerable Lord Sword's torrential attacks like flowing water. It could be seen that under such a prolonged battle atmosphere, their sword formation was growing more and more proficient. Moreover, the attacks that appeared during intervals were growing more and more powerful, and the effects were remarkable. Venerable Lord Sword waved his sword freely. While he resisted the opponent's sword formation alone, most of his attention was still on the door. He had to prevent anyone from the School of Spring and Autumn from leaving this place. To a sect, this was undoubtedly an extraordinary humiliation. Venerable Lord Sword waited quietly, waiting for the moment when the higher-ups of the School of Spring and Autumn could no longer hold it in. In this regard, he had already made full preparations. Once those people attacked, he would immediately activate the myriad ancestral swords and slaughter all the School of Spring and Autumn disciples before him. If you want me to be your whetstone, then you must be prepared to grind all of you into pieces. It was at this delicate moment. A strange shriek rang in the air. A beam of golden light shot down from the sky abruptly and landed in front of Venerable Lord Sword. Venerable Lord Sword snorted. With a wave of his left and right hand, he kept the golden light of communication in his palm. He was still holding his sword in a leisurely manner as he looked down at the enemy. It was obvious that he did not think much of the hundreds of School of Spring and Autumn disciples before him. However, as he looked, his body suddenly froze. His eyes seemed to stare blankly at the sight. The long sword that was thrust out stopped in the air as well. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. The School of Spring and Autumn sword formation disciples were overjoyed. Their swords were like the wind as they counterattacked. Swoosh, 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 Venerable Lord Sword's body was marked with 7 to 8 streaks of sword marks. Fresh blood flowed from the wounds as well. At this moment, this situation caused everyone present to be astonished, and they simply didn't dare to believe what their eyes were seeing. Venerable Lord Sword faced more than 100 experts from the School of Spring and Autumn alone with his sword. He was calm and at ease from the beginning until the end. As he swung his sword, the disciples of the school retreated at the sight of him. The situation was completely passive, with only a few counterattacks. No one could pose a threat to him, not even the slightest bit. But why did the offensive and defensive situation suddenly change, and suddenly the door was wide open, and they were in a state where they didn't even put up any defense? Even the disciples who had succeeded in their attacks were stunned by the sight of blood. What was going on? Why did this devil suddenly stop defending himself? Could it be that he had a sudden urge to die? Was he looking for death? In spite of this, the piercing pain jolted Venerable Lord Sword back to his senses. Aware that he was facing an enemy, the wounds on his body worsened the pain in his heart. Suddenly, he roared, "You're courting death." At this moment, his face that had been calm since he had appeared suddenly became twisted and menacing. A surge of vast and mighty sword intent suddenly burst out crazily. Retreat! A loud warning followed. Two silhouettes, one on the left and one on the right, pounced out from the school gate. They were as fast as shooting stars, rushing to the rescue. Behind these two silhouettes, there were about a dozen other silhouettes that followed, rushing over anxiously. Obviously, the current turn of events was out of everyone's expectations. It was not easy to take advantage of Venerable Lord Sword. If they could not kill him with a single blow, it would only result in an unimaginable backlash. Arg! Venerable Lord Sword howled into the sky, his eyes tearing. In his madness, his eyes were red as if they were glistening with tears. My brother. Chapter 344. Venerable Lord Sword had gone mad. The sudden surge of sorrow and rage had completely filled his heart. The long sword that soared into the sky suddenly spun madly, like a scorching sun, shooting out thousands of sword light without any blind spots. It was not only Venerable Lord Sword's sword that had erupted, but his body, hair, neck, eyes, neck, ears, chest, shoulders, arms, elbows, thighs. Every part of his body was pouring out sharp sword energy in a frenzy. It was released towards the School of Spring and Autumn in a frenzy. At this moment, all the School of Spring and Autumn disciples who wielded swords felt that they had lost control of their swords. They had completely defied their master's will to control them, leaving only the buzzing in the air. At this moment, millions upon millions of sword lights flashed and disappeared. The entire School of Spring and Autumn fell into a state of unprecedented silence. Venerable Lord Sword was still roaring into the sky, his eyes lifted to look at the few silhouettes that were approaching him with a menacing smile. You're a step too late. It was right in front of Venerable Lord Sword. The disciples in charge of setting up the sword formation, the spectating disciples, and the second-generation disciples from the School of Spring and Autumn who were in charge of holding down the formation, all had expressions of despair and fear on their faces. They stood there like statues, waiting for the moment of their deaths. Their eyes were filled with intense disbelief, but none of them could move. Just as Venerable Lord Sword finished his words, rays of blood light shot out from these people. The bodies of these disciples, who seemed to still be standing in place, all shattered at the same time. From head to toe, they all turned into pieces of flesh and blood. The only one who was still breathing in front of the school was Spring and Autumn, Enchanting. However, his body was riddled with holes as well. He had used all his cultivation base to resist the sword current and had retreated 170 feet away. A gurgling sound came from his throat as he stared at Venerable Lord Sword and murmured, You've already cultivated, Sword, Dominator." Before he could finish his words, his body collapsed and twitched on the ground. Then, with a series of crackling sounds, his body turned into a few pieces of flesh and he died. Venerable Lord Sword did not answer a Spring and Autumn's last words. His eyes were fixated on the figures that were rapidly descending from the sky. Strictly speaking, he was only looking at the two leaders. As for the others, they were nothing in his eyes. However, at this moment, his eyes were filled with madness and provocation. Venerable Lord Sword. The two old men who were flying over shouted, How dare you try to kill someone so ruthlessly? We can't let you live. Hand over your life. Faced with the threat of death, Venerable Lord Sword let out a shrill cry and soared into the sky, retrieving the sword that had been tossed into the air. The sword light grew brighter as he charged forward. It's nothing more than a fight of life and death in the Jianghu. Venerable Lord Sword guffawed. The sword in his hand met the incoming swords of the two men. Boom! The three of them collided and separated in three different directions. The two old men were clearly not strong enough. Although they were working together, they still spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their bodies could not stop themselves from retreating, and their eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. Venerable Lord Sword, who was on the opposite side, was not going to let them go. With a long howl, he continued to swing his sword amidst the tumbling force from the recoil. The sword light grew sharper, spreading out like a fan. Pft, pft, pft. Within 1,000 feet of the School of Spring and Autumn's main gate, it was as if a hailstorm the size of a fist had fallen. Dust and smoke rose, the rocks on the ground cracked and disintegrated. The buildings 1,000 feet away were riddled with countless transparent holes. The two old men were forced to the ground by Venerable Lord Sword's unstoppable sword light, falling into an unprecedented passive state. Despite the shock, they did not panic, defending their positions and defending themselves as they waited for Venerable Lord Sword's next attack. Unexpectedly, the long howl faded into the distance. Venerable Lord Sword's voice was still like a long sword piercing into the sky, but he seemed to be advancing and retreating at the same time. With the tumbling momentum after the collision, he turned into a sword light and disappeared. He left just like that? The two old men dashed out of the dust in shock, only to see that Venerable Lord Sword had really disappeared. A long howl came from afar. Brother! I've come to send you off. Both of them were puzzled. This matter seemed to have no reason at all. What were you doing here then? You had come with such an imposing aura just now, obviously with a domineering attitude. You had even gone on a killing spree just now. Why did you leave just like that? There was still a ball of golden light flickering on the ground as far as the eye could see. The golden light had fallen to the ground accidentally when Venerable Lord Sword was attacked by the sword formation when he was distracted. It was also because Venerable Lord Sword had seen the contents of the golden light that he had fallen into an unexpected state of absent-mindedness. One of the elders reached out to pick it up, and he could still sense a powerful spiritual will flickering from it. The Four Seasons Tower's Four Seasons message. Both of them looked at each other in shock. Furthermore, it was sent by Mr. Nian himself. The contents must be different. Such a method of communication could be identified by the overflowing luster of the communication. If it was sent by the Four Seasons Hall, the overflowing luster should be one of the four colors of green, red, yellow, and white. Since it was golden now, it was naturally a message from the Four Seasons Tower's highest authority, Mr. Nian. Both of their expressions turned grim at once as they channeled their divine sense and mystical chi into it at the same time. The golden light flashed. Saber's death, Shueshang, return quickly. Both of their faces suddenly revealed an expression of extreme shock. The Four Seasons Tower's absolute higher-ups, the five venerable lords who intimidated the martial world, had one dead and one injured. It was no wonder that Venerable Lord Sword had suddenly lost his composure and turned to leave after his hysterical outburst. Such a major incident had actually happened within the Four Seasons Tower. Supreme Lord Springfrost of the Four Seasons Towers for Supreme Lords is dead, and now even Venerable Lord Saber of the five Venerable Lords has fallen. One of the elders sucked in a cold breath. I'm afraid the Four Seasons Tower is really going crazy this time. Grand Senior Uncle Bingming, see if we should temporarily avoid the limelight. Yes, Wei Xinglu is still outside, ask him to return immediately. Ask the leader to arrange for reinforcements immediately. The two of them had an abnormally heavy expression on their faces. Clearly, they had realized that this matter was no small matter. Venerable Lord Saber was dead. How many people in the martial world would have to accompany Venerable Lord Saber's unexpected death? The concourse of the underworld. Frost had already enveloped the entire Hell Valley. The 10 kings of Hell had joined forces to fight against the enemy. Ice and Frost flew freely, attacking and defending each other. Their cooperation was flawless. Even when they were surrounded and attacked by hundreds of experts from the concourse of the underworld, they were still able to move freely and swiftly. Obviously, the two who were besieged had the upper hand and even controlled the situation. Perhaps it should be said that they had yet to kill because they still had scruples of the concourse of the underworld's strongest combat power. At this moment, a sinister shadow had begun to flicker in the sky. That was the true ruler of the concourse of the underworld. He had already arrived at the battlefield, ready to step into the fray at any time. Venerable Lord Ice sneered, "Frozen universe." Venerable Lord Frost let out a cold rebuke, "Frosty starry sky." The extreme combination of ice and frost was launched abruptly. Between heaven and earth, there was nothing but white fog. A few gold-ranked assassins had just entered the range of this white fog when their bodies showed signs of frostbite immediately. Ice and Frost continued to unleash their powers, preparing for the upcoming pinnacle battle. It was a pinnacle battle between absolute masters. To the Four Seasons Tower, the concourse of the underworld and the School of Spring and Autumn were entirely different in nature. To the School of Spring and Autumn, the concourse of the underworld was more of a deterrent and could plan slowly. As long as the School of Spring and Autumn was willing to hand over Wei Xinglu and give him appropriate compensation, they could consider turning hostility into friendship. After all, Wei Xinglu had only attacked once that day and did not continue to kill him afterward. However, to the concourse of the underworld, Mr. Nian had issued a kill order, leaving no room for negotiation. Therefore, both of them did not hold back at all in this battle. Seeing that the concourse of the underworld was in a precarious situation, a sinister sneer suddenly rang out. If blade, sword, snow, frost, and ice were here at the same time, I might be a little afraid. But now, there are only two of you, Ice and Frost, and you want to behave atrociously in my Hell Valley? Don't leave then, stay here. A silhouette suddenly blew out, bringing with it an eerie wind that swept through the heaven and earth. Ice and Frost laughed maniacally, not showing the slightest hint of fear as they went forward to meet the newcomer. In an instant, the sky and the air were filled with frost as the eerie wind filled the sky. It was at this moment, a golden light flashed in the air. Venerable Lord Ice caught the golden light of communication and glanced at it. His expression changed immediately. Frost. Let's go. Venerable Lord Frost frowned when he heard him. The white frost in his palm had already solidified into a solid form, ready to strike with all his might. He turned his head to ask unwillingly, "What is it?" Venerable Lord Ice passed the golden light into his hand. Frost's deific sense seeped in and suddenly let out a shrill howl that shook the heaven and earth. Who did it? Who did it? Go back. Venerable Lord Ice urged again. Go back. Venerable Lord Frost's body was covered in frost as he soared into the sky, howling in grief and anguish. Who did it? Arg. Howling, he left into the distance. Venerable Lord Ice spun and the mystical ice on the ground suddenly disappeared. His hands were behind his back, his brows twitching slightly as he squinted at the people of the concourse of the underworld coldly, saying faintly, "This blood debt will be settled another day. People of the concourse of the underworld, take care of yourself. Don't die in the hands of others." Without waiting for a reply, he soared into the sky as well. With a twist in the air, thousands of feet of ice condensed in the air. Thousands of rainbows appeared under the sunlight, a magnificent sight to behold. Then, Venerable Lord Ice disappeared as well. In spite of this, the thousands of feet of mystical ice in the air suddenly turned into countless ice blades and swords, raining down with a loud rumble. Lei Dongtian and Old Mu's injuries were really only superficial wounds. With the bound of Universe's premium medicine to heal them, even without Yun Yang's help, they would be fine by the next afternoon. Yun Yang was not only overjoyed at the duo's condition, he was also secretly amazed. The bound of Universe's Lei family's healing medicine was truly extraordinary. The medicine that Lei Dongtian had been stuffing into his mouth previously must be of the highest quality. Chapter 345. Lei Dongtian's medicine was, of course, top-notch, but Yun Yang's mind was not on this. Right now, all his attention was focused on another matter. Unlike Lei Dongtian and Old Mu, who did not take the Four Seasons Tower seriously, Yun Yang knew the terror of the Four Seasons Tower very well. If the Four Seasons Tower were to launch a full-scale attack with all their experts, the outcome would not be optimistic despite Lei Dongtian and Old Mu's exceptional abilities. Yun Yang estimated that the possibility of these two fellows being defeated was 99%. Estimating the entire Four Seasons Tower based on the abilities of Venerable Lord Snow and Venerable Lord Saber was biased. Yun Yang even suspected that Lei Dongtian and Venerable Lord Saber would be pulverized and killed in an instant if both sides were to fight. Yun Yang could only sigh in this regard. Two idiots who didn't know anything, and they thought they were so awesome. Wouldn't it be better if you listened to me and went back to ask for help? Why did you have to fight here? But you're so stubborn, you've implicated me, my old friend. These two fellows were now recuperating in his own house. It was obvious that they wanted to fight here as well. Yun Yang sadly realized that he had miscalculated. He really did not expect Lei Dongtian to be so stupid. Although he had successfully plotted a bloody battle between the Four Seasons Tower and Lei Dongtian's fearless and foolish character had dragged Yun Yang into the pit. If he had listened to Yun Yang and gone back to ask for help, Yun Yang would naturally have a way to clean himself up. Unfortunately, he refused. What Yun Yang did not expect was that this fellow would refuse to run. Not only did he refuse to run, but he also wanted to maintain a brotherly bond with him. Yun Yang was so conflicted that his intestines were turning green. *CK your brotherly bond. What a load of trouble. Now that Venerable Lord Saber was beheaded and Venerable Lord Snow had escaped with injuries, the Four Seasons Tower's counterattack could come at any time, and it would definitely come in full force. Yun Yang was sensitive enough to feel the pressure of an impending storm. I must be prepared early. Yun Yang muttered in his heart, otherwise, instead of using Lei Dongtian as cannon fodder, I'll become cannon fodder for him first. Even if it's only to the extent of being a collateral damage, I won't be able to bear it. The Four Seasons Tower is the best at taking revenge on the target's family and friends. Ling Xiaozui seemed to have been forced to compromise because of this back then. Now, Yun Yang seemed to be Lei Dongtian's closest and dearest friend. Who would have thought that there would be such a fool in this world? Yun Yang sighed sadly. He discovered that he had dug a hole to bury his two greatest enemies. Just as he was feeling happy, he realized that this hole had actually buried him as well. This pit was too big. A great merit. Greater than the sky. Lei Dongtian's entire body was wrapped in bandages, but his face was flushed with excitement. His eyes were sparkling with excitement. I never thought that I would see the Saber God's bone here. Not only the Saber God, but also the Snow God, the Ice God, the Sword God, and the Frost God. If there are no accidents, there are at least 4 other Deva beings' bones here. Not only the Divine, but also the Divine of Snow, Divine of Ice, Divine of Sword, and Divine of Frost. If I'm not mistaken, there are at least 4 more sets of celestial beings' bones. The Four Seasons Tower's 5 venerable lords have celestial beings' bones in them. It's not surprising that Mr. Nian, as the tower's master, has celestial beings' bones as well. In fact, it's logical. Perhaps, he has more than one set of celestial beings' bones with him. If I can get all of them. Lei Dongtian's eyes turned green. Old Mu was not as spirited as he was. The only feeling Old Mu had at this moment was that his bones were about to fall apart. He was old after all. Even if his cultivation base was profound, his body could not be compared to a young man's. Usually, when he was not injured, he always felt that his physical condition was younger than a young man's. However, now that he was injured, he could clearly feel that his recovery speed was much slower than a young man's even with the same medicinal pills and the same injuries. Old Mu did not even dare to turn over. He could only lie on the bed and said, "Young master, the situation may not be very optimistic. The Four Seasons Tower cannot be underestimated." Old Mu truly felt the danger. The other party only had Venerable Lord Saber, Venerable Lord Snow, and Lord Supreme Wind. It was these three people who had seriously injured the two of them. There was no element of being caught off guard. Even if he and the young lord were not prepared, how could the other party be fully prepared? Although we did not fight in our strongest state, the other party might have been caught off guard and was not in their best state, was it not? They were evenly matched. Venerable Lord Snow had obviously not exerted his full strength at the beginning of the battle. If he had unleashed the snow fief from the beginning, perhaps Venerable Lord Saber would not have fallen in this battle. Moreover, these two people were only a part of the Four Seasons Tower's high-end combat power. If the four Venerable Lords were to come together, each of their cultivation base was similar to Venerable Lord Snow's. Even Mr. Nyen, who was rumored to have a higher cultivation base, would not only not be optimistic, but it would also be pessimistic, even hopeless. Furthermore, no one could say for sure how massive the Four Seasons Tower really was. How could one know that other than Mr. Nyen and the five Venerable Lords, the Four Seasons Tower had no other hidden experts? "Young master, do you really have that much confidence?" Of course, I'm completely confident." Lei Dongtian scratched the itchy scar on his body in satisfaction. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I'm here for everything." Old Mu sighed. "You know what? What do you know? If you knew what you were doing, would both of us be lying here now? You're here for everything. Isn't it because of you that both of us are lying here now?" At this moment, a silhouette flashed by the door. Dong Tianlong jumped in with his entire body wrapped in bandages. "Hey, isn't this the awe-inspiring and unpredictable young Master Lei?" Young Master Lei's body. What the F***CK? Are you hurt? Are you hurt? F***CK, who did this? Who did this? How could they do this to young Master Lei? Hurry up and tell me, I need to thank him. Oh heavens, oh earth, which hero helped me vent my anger? It had to be said that Dong Tianlong and Lei Dongtian were both wrapped in bandages. Both of them looked exactly the same, as if they were brothers in the same boat. Even if there was a difference in their looks and body shapes, there was not much of a difference at first glance since they were covered in bandages. No matter how good-looking they were, no matter how good their bodies were, it was useless at this moment. Dong Tianlong, on the other hand, had been holding it in for a few days. At this moment, he felt that he could finally take his revenge. Although he could only vent his anger verbally, with Dong Tianlong's despicable character, he would not let go of any opportunity as long as there was one, let alone in such a good situation. Even if it was just a glance, he would feel that he had taken his revenge. Lei Dongtian looked over coldly and said faintly, "You don't have to care about who did this. The person who hurt me has now turned into ashes and his flesh into mud. If you really want to thank him, perhaps I can send you over? It's just a matter of waving my hand. It's very convenient." Dong Tianlong quickly said, "It's better not to trouble you. It's enough as long as the intention is there. I'll burn more joss paper for him next year on this day. It'll be more meaningful." What a joke. Send him over to thank him? Wasn't that the same as killing himself? It's very convenient for you to wave your hand, but it's not convenient for me. Dong Tianlong was absolutely unwilling to do this. Lei Dongtian looked at Dong Tianlong coldly and said, "The person who hit me is dead." "Where is the person who hit you?" Dong Tianlong paused for a moment and said, "When I'm invincible in the world, I'll definitely beat this person up 3,600 times. Lei Dongtian chuckled. Old Mu was laughing as well. "When you're invincible in the world? Actually, you're already invincible in the world now." Yin Yang brought in a gust of cold wind from the outside. "Who in this world can compare to your despicableness?" You're also invincible, but it's just a different kind of invincible. Just like how the benevolent are invincible, the merciless are equally invincible. Boss. Dong Tianlong said with a bitter face, actually, I'm an upright, righteous, gentle, courteous, and humble young man. How can you say it like this? It'll affect my noble image. If this young brother can't find a wife in the future, the problem of my reputation, Yun Yang guffawed at once. Lei Dongtian and Old Mu laughed as well. Everything else aside, Dong Tianlong's despicable character was actually not detestable. The prerequisite was that he did not spout dirty words. Boss, is the mystical beast training done? Dong Tianlong asked fawningly. Well, today's training mission is basically over. Yin Yang smiled faintly and said, actually, the entire mystical beast training can come to an end in another 3 to 4 days. By then, all of you can go home and scram together. Go home? Scram? Dong Tianlong was stunned. Obviously, he was dumbfounded by the sudden eviction order. Lei Dongtian and Old Mu looked at each other. Yes, 3 days later. Actually, I've already finalized the bone structure of those little mystical beasts. You guys are already familiar with the subsequent training plan and training methods. There's not much meaning in staying here. Not only is it a waste of time, there's also the risk of exposing your foundation. Yin Yang smiled and said, why don't you bring the mystical beasts back? As long as you follow the usual training and nurturing, basically, it's not a big problem for them to become 9th level mystical beasts. What's more, as long as you really develop feelings for the little mystical beasts, they'll definitely recognize you as their master from the bottom of their hearts. They'll never leave you, never abandon you, and share weal and woe together. When the time comes, I'll send all of you off. Dong Tianlong stuttered and said, let Chun Wanfeng and the other 2 go. I won't leave anyway. Yun Yang glared at him and said, are you going to continue to freeload here? Dong Tianlong protested, the 3 families already have mystical beasts, but I don't. What's the use of just training? Yin Yang's voice was meaningful as he said, be content. Your sword is already much more valuable than a simple 9th level mystical beast. Chapter 346. Lei Dongtian's medicine was, of course, top-notch, but Yun Yang's mind was not on this. Right now, all his attention was focused on another matter. Unlike Lei Dongtian and Old Mu who did not take the Four Seasons Tower seriously, Yun Yang knew the terror of the Four Seasons Tower very well. If the Four Seasons Tower were to launch a full-scale attack with all their experts, the outcome would not be optimistic despite Lei Dongtian and Old Mu's exceptional abilities. Yin Yang estimated that the possibility of these 2 fellows being defeated was 99%. Estimating the entire Four Seasons Tower based on the abilities of Venerable Lord Snow and Venerable Lord Saber was biased. Yin Yang even suspected that Lei Dongtian and Venerable Lord Saber would be pulverized and killed in an instant if both sides were to fight. Yin Yang could only sigh in this regard. 2 idiots who didn't know anything, and they thought they were so awesome. Wouldn't it be better if you listened to me and went back to ask for help? Why did you have to fight here? But you've dragged me into this, old friend. These 2 fellows were now recuperating in his own house. It was obvious that they wanted to fight here as well. Yin Yang sadly realized that he had miscalculated. He really did not expect Lei Dongtian to be so stupid. Although he had successfully set up a bloody battle between the Four Seasons Tower and Lei Dongtian's reckless character had also dragged Yun Yang into the pit. If he had listened to Yun Yang and gone back to ask for help, Yun Yang would naturally have a way to clean himself up. Unfortunately, he refused. What Yun Yang did not expect was that this fellow would refuse to run. Not only did he refuse to run, but he also wanted to maintain a brotherly bond with him. Yin Yang was so conflicted that his intestines were turning green. F***ck your brotherly bond. What a load of trouble. Now that Venerable Lord Saber was beheaded and Venerable Lord Snow had escaped with injuries, the Four Seasons Tower's counterattack could come at any time and it would definitely come in full force. Yin Yang was sensitive enough to feel the pressure of an impending storm. I must be prepared early. Yin Yang muttered in his heart, otherwise, instead of using Lei Dongtian as cannon fodder, I'll become cannon fodder for him first. Even if it's only to the extent of being a collateral damage, I won't be able to bear it. The Four Seasons Tower is the best at taking revenge on the target's family and friends. Ling Xiaozui seemed to have been forced to compromise because of this. Now, Yin Yang seemed to be Lei Dongtian's closest and dearest friend. Who would have thought that there would be such an idiot in this world? Yin Yang sighed sorrowfully. He discovered that he had dug a hole to bury his two greatest enemies. Just as he was feeling happy, he realized that this hole had actually buried him as well. And he couldn't even crawl out. This pit was too big. It's a great achievement. It's even bigger than the sky. Lei Dongtian's entire body was wrapped in bandages, but his face was flushed with excitement. His eyes were shining with excitement. I never thought that I would see the Saber God's bone here. Not only the Saber God, but also the Snow God, the Ice God, the Sword God, and the Frost God. If there are no accidents, there are at least 4 other Deva beings' bones here. Maybe even more. The Four Seasons Tower's 5 venerable lords are basically confirmed to have celestial being bones in their bodies. It's not surprising that Mr. Nian, as the tower's master, has celestial being bones in his body as well. It's even logical and logical. Perhaps, he has more than one set of celestial being bones in his possession. If I get all of them. Lei Dongtian's eyes were green with envy. Old Mu, on the other hand, was not as spirited as him. The only feeling Old Mu had at this moment was that all the bones in his body were about to fall apart. After all, he was old. Even if his cultivation base was profound, his body could not be compared to a young man's. Usually, when he was not injured, he would always feel that his physical condition was younger than a young man's. However, when he was really injured, he could clearly feel that the same medicinal pills and the same injuries, his recovery speed was much slower than a young man's. Old Mu did not even dare to force himself to turn over. He could only lie on the bed and said, "Young master, the situation may not be very optimistic. The Four Seasons Tower cannot be underestimated." Old Mu truly felt the danger. The enemy only had Venerable Lord Saber, Venerable Lord Snow, and Lord Supreme Wind. It was these 3 people who had seriously injured both of them. There was no element of being caught off guard here. Even if he and the young lord had not prepared properly, how could the enemy have been fully prepared? Although we did not fight in our strongest state, the enemy might have been caught in an unexpected situation and was not in a good state. Everyone was evenly matched. Venerable Lord Snow had obviously not exerted his full strength at the beginning of the battle. If he had deployed the Snow Fief from the beginning, perhaps Venerable Lord Saber would not have fallen in this battle. Moreover, these 2 people were only a part of the Four Seasons Tower's high-end combat power. If the 4 Venerable Lords were to come together, each of their cultivation base was similar to Venerable Lord Snow's, and even Mr. Nian, who was rumored to have a higher cultivation base, the situation of the battle would not only not be optimistic, it would be pessimistic and even hopeless. Furthermore, no one could really tell how massive the Four Seasons Tower was. How could one know that other than Mr. Nian and the 5 Venerable Lords, there were no other hidden experts in the Four Seasons Tower? Young master, do you really have such confidence? Of course, I have complete confidence. Lei Dongtian scratched the itchy scar on his body in satisfaction. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I'm here for everything. Old Mu sighed. You know what? What do you know? If you knew what you were doing, would both of us be lying here now? You're here for everything. Isn't it because you're here that both of us are lying here now? At this moment, a silhouette flashed by the door. Dong Tianlong jumped in with bandages all over his body. Hey, isn't this the awe-inspiring and unpredictable young Master Lei? Young Master Lei's body is F***CK. Injured? Actually injured? F***CK me, who did this? Who did this? How could they do this to young Master Lei? Hurry up and tell me, I need to thank him. Oh heavens, oh earth, which hero helped me vent my anger? It had to be said that Dong Tianlong and Lei Dongtian were both wrapped in bandages. Both of them looked exactly the same, as if they were brothers in the same boat. Even if there was a difference in their looks and body shapes, there was not much of a difference at first glance since they were covered in bandages. No matter how good-looking they were, no matter how good their bodies were, it was useless at this moment. Dong Tianlong, on the other hand, had been holding it in for a few days. At this moment, he felt that he could finally take his revenge. Although he could only vent his anger verbally, with Dong Tianlong's despicable character, he would not let go of any opportunity as long as there was one, let alone in such a good situation. Even if it was just a glance, he would feel that he had taken a considerable amount of revenge. Lei Dongtian looked over coldly and said faintly, "You don't have to care about who did this. The person who hurt me has now turned into ashes and flesh. If you really want to thank him, perhaps I can send you over? It's just a matter of waving my hand. It's very convenient." Dong Tianlong quickly said, "It's better not to trouble you. It's fine as long as the intention is there. I'll burn more joss paper for him next year on this day. It'll be more meaningful." Send him over to thank him? Wouldn't that be killing himself? It's convenient for you to wave your hand, but it's not convenient for me. Dong Tianlong would never do such a thing. Lei Dongtian looked at Dong Tianlong coldly and said, "The person who beat me up is dead. Where is the person who beat you up?" Dong Tianlong paused for a moment and said, "When I'm invincible in the world, I'll definitely beat this person up 3,600 times." Lei Dongtian chuckled. Old Mu was laughing as well. "When you're invincible in the world? Actually, you're already invincible in the world now." Yin Yang brought in a gust of cold wind from outside. "Who in this world can compare to your despicability? You're also invincible, but it's not the same. Just like how the benevolent are invincible, the unbenevolent are equally invincible." "Boss," Dong Tianlong said with a bitter face, "Actually, I'm an upright, righteous, gentle, respectful, and humble young man. How can you say it like this? It'll affect my noble image. If I can't find a wife in the future, the problem of my reputation." Yun Yang guffawed at once. Lei Dongtian and Old Mu laughed as well. Other things aside, Dong Tianlong's despicable character was actually not detestable at all. The prerequisite was that he did not spout dirty words. "Boss, is the mystical beast training done?" Dong Tianlong asked fawningly. "Yes, today's training is basically done." Yin Yang smiled faintly and said, "Actually, the entire mystical beast training can come to an end in another 3 to 4 days. By then, all of you can go home and scram together." "Go home? Scram?" Dong Tianlong was stunned. Obviously, he was dumbfounded by the sudden eviction order. Lei Dongtian and Old Mu looked at each other. "Yes, 3 days later. Actually, I've already finalized the bone structure of those little mystical beasts. You guys are already familiar with the follow-up training plan and training methods. There's not much meaning in staying here. Not only is it a waste of time, there's also the risk of exposing your foundation." Yin Yang smiled and said, "Why don't you bring the mystical beasts back? As long as you follow the usual training and nurturing, basically, it's not a big problem for them to become 9th level mystical beasts. What's more, as long as you develop feelings for the little mystical beasts, they'll definitely recognize you as their master from the bottom of their hearts. They'll never leave you, never abandon you, and share weal and woe together. When the time comes, I'll send all of you off." Dong Tianlong stuttered and said, "Let Chun Wanfeng and the other 2 go." "I won't be leaving anyway." Yun Yang glared at him and said, "Are you still going to freeload here?" Dong Tianlong protested, "The 3 families already have mystical beasts, but I don't. What's the use of just training?" Yin Yang's voice was meaningful as he said, "Be content. Your sword is already much more valuable than a simple 9th level mystical beast." Chapter 347. Dong Tianlong scratched his head. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was amiss. At the very least, Yun Yang had never asked him to leave since he had been here for such a long time. But now, he was asking them to leave. There must be something fishy. Go tell them. It's most appropriate for you to say it. Yun Yang's voice was gentle, but it was unquestionable and there was no room for resistance. All right then. Dong Tianlong walked out without any hesitation. Lei Dongtian watched as Dong Tianlong disappeared outside the room and said in a heavy voice, "Brother Yun, could it be that you?" Yun Yang smiled and said, "It's nothing. Those who should leave will leave. Since they have to leave sooner or later, it's better to leave sooner rather than later." Lei Dongtian was silent for a moment before he said, "Brother Yun, this time, I have implicated you." Lei Dongtian was not a fool, nor was he a playboy. Although he was rather obstinate and self-opinionated, he was definitely not someone who did not know what was good for him. How could he not know that the reason Yun Yang had hurriedly sent Dong Tianlong and the others away was because of the impending danger to the residents of Yun? 99% of the danger in the residence of Yun was caused by him. Putting aside his own weight, even if Yun Yang was on the opposing side of the Four Seasons Tower, he would never be included in the list of the Four Seasons Tower's first and most forceful target. Yun Yang chuckled softly. Brother Lei is thinking too much. Even without Brother Lei, this young brother will have to face the Four Seasons Tower sooner or later. Lei Dongtian sighed deeply. How could it not matter? There was a huge difference between the timing earlier and later. Perhaps it was possible that they would not be able to meet again for the rest of their lives. There was no way to repay this deep friendship. Yun Yang watched as Chiu Yun-san and the others packed their things quietly, as well as the puzzled gazes that kept coming his way. His expression was calm and he said nothing. All along, his plan had been to use the four noble families as cannon fodder, including Dong Tianlong and the other three. That was why he proposed to nurture mystical beasts for them and asked the four noble families to send people over. Disregarding everything else, the combat power gathered in the residence of Yun now obviously included many of the elite forces of the four noble families. As soon as the Four Seasons Tower made a move, there would be casualties among these people. If they suffered heavy casualties, it would touch the bottom line of the four great clans. Naturally, they would fight to the death. Although the four noble families had no chance of winning against the Four Seasons Tower even if they were to give it their all, they would still be able to buy some time for Yun Yang. With the four noble families' reputations in the present world, they would be able to deplete part of the Four Seasons Tower's effective forces no matter how ineffective they were. Now, however, Yun Yang had changed his mind. The change was sudden. That day, when Dong Tianlong was injured by Lei Dongtian, Chiu Yun-san and the others did not even flinch in the face of Lei Dongtian. It had touched Yun Yang, reminding him of his own brothers. Suddenly, his heart softened. It was then that Yun Yang saw another side of the four popinjays. Loyalty. Comradeship. Thinking back to what the four great young masters had done for him, although there was a considerable amount of utilitarian elements, it also showed that they were sincere in making friends with him. Therefore, Yun Yang hesitated. If Dong Tianlong and the others were to shirk the responsibility and show their ugly side and faced with benefits, if Dong Tianlong did not find the mystical beast offspring and really laid his hands on the other three families' mystical beasts, Yun Yang would definitely maintain his original intention. He would not feel any psychological pressure at all when it came to trapping and killing such people. However, this was not the case. They all liked benefits and valued them highly. When they saw great benefits, they would be envious, jealous, and resentful. For example, the three noble families had mystical beasts but Dong Tianlong did not. For example, when Dong Tianlong obtained the treasured sword, spirited cow, Chiu Yun-san and the others were envious. They were all written and covetous. However, that was all. But he wouldn't do anything more excessive. Dong Tianlong had been venting his anger, wanting to drug and destroy the sword, but it was all talk and no action. Xia Bingchuan and the others gritted their teeth and wanted to snatch Dong Tianling's sword, swearing with bloodshot eyes. However, when Dong Tianling was really injured, they would still stand up for him without hesitation. Even though they knew they were no match, they had to stand up for their brother even if it was just talk. Yin Yang had seen all of this. This was already extremely precious, rare and precious. These 4 popinjays actually had their own insistence in their hearts. They laughed and scolded, enjoying life without any desire for power. Perhaps it was because they had long abandoned themselves from the fight for power in their families. It was precisely because of this self-awareness that even though he seemed to have no great ambitions, he was still able to live his life in a real and realistic manner. Qiu Yunsan and the other 2 were still fearless when faced with Lei Dongtian, an expert whom they could not even resist. The moment when they would rather die than retreat, it reminded Yun Yang of his own brothers. His heart was suddenly filled with bitterness and softness. He made a decision in an instant. Let them go. Yin Yang stood up and said, "Cousins, come, let me introduce a good friend to you. He's a dragon among men, a rare talent." Yu Rulan and Ji Lingxi came together and their curious gazes fell on Lei Dongtian. Lei Dongtian lost interest immediately after exchanging glances with the 2 ladies. These 2 cousins of Yun Yang had good figures, but their faces and skin, why were they so ugly? They were the typical type of people who wanted to commit a crime by looking at their figures and defend themselves by looking at their faces. This is the young Master Lei I've mentioned to you before. Handsome and talented, am I right? Haha. Yin Yang laughed and introduced him enthusiastically. Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan naturally knew what he meant. They went forward at the same time and acted friendly. Lei Dongtian coughed twice and chuckled dryly, "Both of you, nice to meet you, young ladies. I'm injured, I'm sorry." He ran back to his room like he was escaping. He had no choice but to run. Looking at Yun Yang's matchmaker face, praising his brothers the moment he opened his mouth, it would be terrible if he planned to introduce his cousins to him. He might as well kill him then, haha. Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan could not help chuckling despite their heavy hearts. Their gazes towards the direction of Lei Dongtian's departure were filled with disdain. Perhaps you don't know that the 2 of us in front of you now are Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan, whom you've always wanted to capture. Although the 2 ladies had predicted that Lei Dongtian would avoid their current looks, Lei Dongtian was a terrifying existence that was like a nightmare to them. No matter how calm they looked on the surface, they were still frightened deep down. Now, however, they could not wait to tease this bastard more to avenge themselves. Popinjay. Yu Rulan gave her evaluation of Lei Dongtian, deranged, inhumane, and ignorant of the ways of the world. Stubborn and self-centered, a popinjay. Ji Lingxi snorted and said, "A man who deserves to die." Yin Yang smiled faintly. His impression of Lei Dongtian was not as extreme as the 2 ladies. In his heart, Lei Dongtian was also a man who had to die. However, it did not mean that Yun Yang could give the most objective evaluation of Lei Dongtian. Chapter 348. From Lei Dongtian's arrangements when he first came into contact with him, from indirectly coming into contact with Dong Tianling and not killing him despite being humiliated, Lei Dongtian had taken the opportunity to build a friendship with him and was eager to rope him in, not hesitating to give him a large amount of quality resources. He had even revealed many high-end secrets of the bound of universe to him. All of these showed that this person was a ruthless and calculative character. It was just that he had fallen into Yun Yang's trap since the beginning and did not realize how deep he had sunk into it. If the situation was clear, Yun Yang was not confident that he could trick the other party. Then again, scheming was a deliberate ploy. If one knew that they were enemies and did not scheme, would one not be a fool? This time, he had completely cleared Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan's suspicions. Under the premise of a deliberate ploy, it was as simple as that. One encounter was all that mattered. However, he still had to consider the safety of the 2 girls and where to hide. "We're not leaving." Ji Lingxi and Yu Rulan's reactions were identical. Both of them had seen the entire process of Yun Yang's ploy, so they knew what kind of whirlpool the residents of Yun was now embroiled in. Facing the Four Seasons Tower's impending revenge, even if the main target was Lei Dongtian, Yun Yang had also dragged himself into it when he planned everything. Whether it was because he was a prominent figure in Yutong's higher authority or because he was Lei Dongtian's best friend, the Four Seasons Tower would not turn a blind eye to Yun Yang. He was the best target, the only choice. If he were to leave at such a time, the two girls felt that it was absolutely impossible. After so many years of being in this world and experiencing so many joys and sorrows and family betrayals, Yun Yang could be said to be their last warm harbor. They would not leave. The two women's resolute attitude made Yun Yang feel a surge of warmth despite him being at his wit's end. They were indeed eighth brother's younger sister and fiancé. They knew that danger was coming, but they still did not seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. However, how could he let the two of them be in danger? Even if it was only a risk, he could not. Lao Mei, Lao Bai, Lao Fang. The residents of Yun is about to face a huge problem. The Four Seasons Tower's revenge will come soon. What do you think? Feel free to speak your mind. Yun Yang looked at the three people in front of him. It's just a battle of strength. Lao Mei was nonchalant. As long as I can accompany young master, it's fine. Life and death is but a blink of an eye. Fang Mafei smiled casually. Sigh, can I go to the toilet? Bai Yishue sighed. No. What can I do? It was nothing more than fighting with them. There's still a long way to go before our agreement expires. Bai Yishue's expression was bitter. Yin Yang chuckled and took out 3 jade boxes from his sleeves. There are 3 cinnabar fruits in each box. You can eat one later and it should increase your cultivation base by 50 years. The second one can increase your cultivation base by 30 years, and the third one can increase your cultivation base by 20 years. For the next 3 days, I will eat one every day. I must raise my combat power to a new height and increase my chances of survival. Bai Yishue and the other 2 men's eyes bulged. If what Lei Dongtian said is true, I can increase my cultivation base by 100 years if I consume 3 scarlet fruits. Yin Yang said softly, I hope that we will all be fine after this catastrophe. Fang Mafei and the other 2 men's breaths quickened as they stared at the jade boxes before them, speechless. This was the true meaning of heaven and earth's treasure. The legendary heaven and earth treasure that could increase one's cultivation base just by eating one. It was actually placed right in front of them. It was not just 1, but 3 for each of them. 100 years of cultivation base? Everyone knew that no matter how precious the heaven and earth treasure was, only the first one could increase the user's cultivation base the best. The second one would be greatly reduced and the third one would be even worse than the second one. Therefore, Yin Yang giving each of them 3 scarlet fruits at once was, strictly speaking, a huge waste. There were 9 scarlet fruits for the 3 of them. If they were to be divided among the 9 of them, each of them could increase their cultivation base by 50 years. The difference was obvious. However, Yin Yang had given the scarlet fruits to the 3 of them without hesitation. The importance he placed on them and the sincerity he showed was obvious. Thank you, young master. Even Bai Yishue could not help being moved. A martial artist's thirst for improvement was something no ordinary person could understand. That was simply a kind of extreme fanaticism. After all, Yin Yang giving out 3 scarlet fruits at once was unheard of in the Tianxian continent. This was not something that could be described as generous. It's a pity that you can only eat 3 of these scarlet fruits. If you eat any more, you'll be no different from an ordinary fruit. Yin Yang sighed. Take them and disperse. You must improve your abilities within 3 days. Perhaps these 3 days are the only days we can relax. Yes, young master. Lao Mei, Fang Mafei, and Bai Yishue's eyes shone brightly. Yin Yang was in the middle, facing the 4 popinjays of spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Boss, we really don't want to leave. Why do you think we should go back to the family? We're just not valued in the family. Chiu Yun-san hung his head low. It's nothing compared to living here, doing whatever we want and being free. Yes, once we go back, it's basically no different from being locked up. There's someone poking at your forehead and scolding you every day. It's even worse than being locked up, that's right. Dong Tianlong was wrapped up like a dumpling. There are too many elders in the family, each of them can point at us and scold us, and we can't even talk back. Can you imagine that atmosphere, boss? It's so painful that it's unbearable to look at it. It's not a joke, Xia Bingchuan nodded. Actually, it's better to let the guards send the mystical beasts back. Isn't it better for us to stay here and play with boss? Yin Yang laughed. Don't tell me you can stay here for the rest of your lives. You'll have to go back sooner or later. Even if you play here for a year or 10 years, there'll still be a day of separation. How can there be a banquet that never comes to an end? The four of them sighed together, their dejection evident in their expressions. Yin Yang said in a low voice, for brothers, although you may or may not know it yourselves during this period of time, you've indeed helped me a lot. Yin Yang expresses his sincere gratitude here. Yin Yang's sudden change in demeanor stunned the four of them. Not only did they not know what to do, they were also at a loss. After a while, they said, "What are you talking about, boss? It's your younger brother's turn if there's a problem. Don't interrupt, let me finish." Yin Yang took a deep breath and said softly, "I know that although all of you have your own selfish motives, everyone's relationship during this period of time has been pretty good and we've been getting along very happily. Before you leave, I'll give each of you a gift." Yin Yang pushed out square jade boxes and said softly, "In the box in front of each of you, there's a 500-year-old cinnabar fruit. After consuming it, immediately cultivate your qi and you'll gain 50 years of pure mystical qi cultivation base." Yin Yang smiled and said, "Consider it a parting gift from me to the four brothers." This time, the four of them went from being in a daze to being sluggish. They felt as if their brains had suddenly exploded. What? The legendary cinnabar fruit? A 500-year-old cinnabar fruit at that? How could their boss give away such a God-given opportunity so casually? One must know that each time such a legendary treasure of heaven and earth appeared in the martial world, it would be accompanied by a bloodbath. Even if a family were to obtain such an item, they would have to pay a certain price. Moreover, Dong Tianlong and the other three brothers knew very well that even if their own family were to obtain this item, it would never be their turn. Yet, their boss had given it to them so casually. Could it be that they were dreaming? Brotherhood is the most precious thing, but even after you've obtained it, it's still easy to destroy it. Perhaps it's just a word, a fight of pride, and the brotherhood will be gone. Yin Yang said seriously, "I hope that the four of you will never forget this bond between you no matter what happens. Don't destroy it easily, don't forget this rare fate." The four of them were still in a daze, unable to face reality. There's no need to wait for the future. Consume the cinnabar fruit this afternoon and don't mention this to anyone. After you're done cultivating and digesting it, leave immediately. Dong Tianlong, remember to look for me when you leave tonight. I have something else to tell you. Yin Yang stood up slowly and said, "The rise and fall of fate has its own cause and effect. If it's fated, we'll meet again." By the time the four of them had regained their senses, Yin Yang's tall and straight figure had already disappeared from the room. The four of them still sat where they were quietly, still feeling the violent impact in their minds. The four popinjays did not even glance at the four jade boxes on the table that contained the cinnabar fruit, nor did they touch them. Yin Yang stood quietly outside the door, observing for a moment before leaving. His handsome face was expressionless, with a depth that he had never shown before. "All along, I've only been thinking of how to use you all. The spirited serpent sword that I've imbued with the air of vitality, the three mystical beasts that have been imbued with the air of vitality, and the four cinnabar fruits, consider them my compensation to all of you. Yin Yang thought quietly in his heart. Although all of you are popinjays, each of you is a man of character. If I had nothing to worry about, perhaps I could really make friends with all of you. It's a pity that your association with me now will only cause all of you to lose your lives in the hands of the Four Seasons Tower. In fact, I'll even destroy your entire clan. My original plan was to let all of you suffer great losses, and I've always done so. However, at the very last moment, I've decided to let all of you go. Because each and every one of you is adorable. In front of Yun Zuyu and Supreme Flame's cenotaph. Yin Yang's expression was calm as he stood there quietly. His gaze was deep and serene. After writing this chapter, Yin Yang inexplicably felt much more relaxed. I am very happy for him. Chapter 349. I read a lot of books. Cities, history, fantasy, xianxia, except for the supernatural, I read everything else. Everyone can choose according to their preferences. The following rankings are in no particular order. It is meaningless. After the book, Flying Sky Football Modifier. First Chaos in History Fake Hero. Tang Dynasty's First Manor. 9 All-Rounders. Xinfeng Territory. Han Yu's Light and Shadow Intertwined. Reborn as a Bookworm. Serialized Books, Perfect Life. Not a Small Star. My Sister is a Big Star. My King, Please Spare My Life. Tang Dynasty's Good Landlord. Reborn as a Novel's Villain. Taming Great Song. Evil Superstar. Tang Dynasty's Xinguan's #1 Playboy. I Am Valdi. There are hundreds of books on my bookshelf. After everyone has finished reading these, I will recommend others to you. Chapter 350. The more Dong Tianlang thought about it, the more excited he became. His eyes were fantasizing about the beautiful future, especially the shocked expressions of others. He felt like he was on the verge of orgasm. His body slanted and he sprawled on Yun Yang's blanket, both his hands patting the blanket as he guffawed. It was wild laughter, reckless laughter, high-spirited laughter. Grr, 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 grr. Yun Yang was exasperated, speechless once again. After a long, long time, are you done laughing? How much longer do you plan to laugh? No, grr, grr, grr. Are you done or not? The voice was stern. Grr. I'm done laughing. Dong Tianlang was embarrassed. Yin Yang looked at him expressionlessly, speechless. Dong Tianlang straightened his body in embarrassment. Yin Yang's gaze then shifted back to his blanket, his gaze icy. Dong Tianlang's expression froze. He hurriedly smoothed the creases with his hands in a fawning manner, only to see a wet spot. It was his saliva from laughing and a ball of snot. Dong Tianlang knew that he was in trouble and hurriedly wiped it away. Another man's bodily fluids were on a man's blanket. This was absolutely intolerable. Yin Yang was expressionless, the muscles on his face twitching as he stared at Dong Tianlang's buttocks. Dong Tianlang felt uncomfortable all over. He stood up awkwardly but bowed with all his might and said humbly, "Boss. I'm here. I'm here. What am I here for?" Yin Yang's gaze was hollow. What the F***ck was he? Dong Tianlang staggered out of the room, apologizing as he walked. "Boss, look at me. I've dirted your blanket by accident." Boss, remember to wash it later. Don't let anyone else see it, then no one will think that you've wet the bed. Yun Yang's expression was dark as he rubbed his hands together, his murderous intent overflowing. Dong Tianlang took a few steps back as he walked out. "Boss, you..." Everything is fine. It's just that snot. You just have to deal with it. You haven't done it after all, so don't let others think that you're doing it. Actually, it's nothing. All men will do it. If you really don't have it, then you'll really be doing it. But it's not good to be misunderstood. Yun Yang's eyes widened. He was truly at a loss this time. What did he say? What's that? That's not that. What's all this? Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Dong Tianlong seemed to have thought of something when he saw Yun Yang's expression turn from frosty to dumbfounded. He guffawed maniacally, unable to catch his breath and unable to close his mouth, as if he wanted to laugh himself to death. Yun Yang was exasperated. What's wrong with you? What are you laughing at? Ha ha ha. Dong Tianlong's laughter grew louder until he could barely catch his breath. Bam! Yun Yang inexplicably felt that he was being looked down upon. With a kick, Dong Tianlong was flung out like he was riding on a cloud. He sprawled on the snowy ground, still guffawing uncontrollably. One of the Dong family's experts asked carefully, "Why was young master kicked out? Did you ask clearly what young master Yun wanted us to do? What are you laughing at? Could it be that young master Yun has sealed your laughing acupoint?" Huh? Dong Tianlong was dumbfounded when he heard the question. He slapped his thigh and said, "Oh no, I've forgotten about this important matter." A few Dong family's experts who were waiting outside were exasperated. How could you forget about this? What did you go in for then? Can you King laugh at the important matter? I really want to ask, what did you go in for? You're the one who's smiling like a fur seal, and you actually went back and said a bunch of pretentious things. Your plan is pretty good, and your imagination is pretty good, but, do you think we're all deaf and dumb waiting outside? Young Master Yun calling you a fool is a light touch to the extreme. You're King retard that your father has never seen in so many years of living. Dong Tianlong got up hurriedly and ran back in. Get out. Yun Yang's roar shook the heavens. Dong Tianlong was flustered. I'm just here to ask my *SS. Yin Yang said furiously, what were you laughing at just now? What was that? What were you King talking about? What were you laughing at? What was that? I was laughing. Dong Tianlong recalled the series of conversations just now and a wave of laughter rushed to his head again. He opened his mouth wide again. Ha 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 ha. Burp. Arg. With a blood-curdling scream, he was kicked out again. The few Dong family's experts outside were truly speechless. Are you even capable of doing this, you idiot? Do you know how to speak? Do you know how to do things? Can you be a little more decent? Rage rose in the hearts of the few of them as their courage grew. They did not care that this was their own young master anymore. They pounced on him and pulled his collar open, stuffing a large amount of snow and ice into him. I'll make you laugh. Laugh your ass off. Arg. Dong Tianlong's scream was earth-shattering. Dong Tianlong walked in shivering for the third time, his face pale and lips pale. My lord. What do you want me to help you with? I'm frozen to death. I'm really frozen to death. I'm already being dominated by the icy chill now. Are they really my own guards? Not only did they strip my clothes and stuff snow in, they even sealed my mystical chi. In this world, who would have such a deranged guard? It's not just one, it's a group of them. Why do I always meet these weirdos? Dong Tianlong felt like he could not go on any longer. Yin Yang looked at him coldly. Dong Tianlong felt the urge to laugh again, almost bursting out in laughter. Luckily, it was too cold and the chill on his body had yet to dissipate, reminding him that he could barely hold it in. Besides, the residents of Yun still had strong masters like Lei Dongtian and Old Mu. Nothing should have happened to them. Boss, you take care too. When the three of them said this, they were especially sincere. In the future, the sky is high and the water is long. Don't forget our family and one of your brothers. No matter what happens, as long as boss writes a note or a word, I, your brother, will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. How thoughtful. Thank you. Take care. Yin Yang smiled. The three of them picked up the 3 Xian beast cubs that were in deep sleep. However, anyone who had some knowledge of Xian beasts would be able to tell that these 3 Xian beasts were no longer the same. Their nature had changed, and their future was limitless. The people from the 3 noble families bowed deeply to Yun Yang. Young Master Yun, thank you very much. Yun Yang nodded. We shall meet again. He lifted his head and looked at the clouds that were rising from afar. It looked like another blizzard was coming. Chun Wanfeng and the others took a few steps back. Dong Tianlang stepped forward and said in a troubled tone, Boss, what did you say just now? It's all right, it's really all right. Yun Yang had made up his mind to not use this fellow anymore. He found a random reason and said, you can go back too. It's really not a big deal. Originally, I wanted to ask you to help me find some netherworld grass, but after thinking about it, it's all about luck. It's too difficult to find it if I want to. I'd better find it myself when I have time. Chapter 351. Netherworld Grass. Dong Tianlang perked up. Don't worry, boss. I'll find one for you even if I have to go to hell. Very well. Yin Yang cupped his hands together and said loudly, for brothers, friends, this joyous gathering will come to an end. Don't forget this day even if you're at the ends of the earth. The martial world's road is long, the secular world is long, we shall meet again. Take care, young Master Yun. Take care, boss. When Dong Tianlang and the other 3 walked out of the residence of Yun's door, they turned back to look. Yin Yang was still standing in the snow, dressed in his usual purple robe. His posture was straight, his smile handsome and charming, he was a picture of beauty. Unexpectedly, the 4 of them all felt a sour feeling in their hearts, and tears almost flowed out. Boss, take care, the voices of the 4 people were mixed with sobs. Yin Yang waved his hand lightly, his gaze filled with a blessing that had never been there before. He said in his heart, the 4 of you, take care as well. We shall meet again if fate allows it. The men from the 4 noble families had finally left. Lei Dongtian stood behind Yin Yang with his arms behind his back. Looking at the crowd that was gradually leaving, Lei Dongtian asked faintly, why didn't you let them stay? Why did you let them go? Yin Yang was silent for a moment. He only smiled after a while but did not say anything. Lei Dongtian said, although their cultivation base is not high, they are still a fighting force. They also have the advantage of numbers. When the battle is needed, they can be put to good use even if it's a decoy. Yin Yang said softly, however, if they were to stay, I'm afraid none of the 135 of them will survive. Lei Dongtian asked, you're doing this for this? Yin Yang nodded quietly and said, since their help is limited, why should we let them stay and expose our flaws? Lei Dongtian was silent for a moment. How could he not know that Yin Yang was merely making excuses? He also felt that Yin Yang did not want the 4 noble families to perish in this battle because of his friendship with the 4 young masters. Otherwise, they would not be able to face their family's investigation, regardless of whether the 4 young masters could survive or not. Yin Yang composed himself and turned to look at Lei Dongtian, saying seriously, Brother Lei, if you were them, I would send you away as soon as possible. Being like old friends in an instant is not a lie. Lei Dongtian suddenly felt warmth in his heart. He smiled and said, really? Yin Yang said, even now, I hope that Brother Lei can leave and return to your home, to avoid the 4 Seasons Tower. Lei Dongtian felt a surge of emotions in his heart. He said, good brother. But I won't leave. He turned to look at Yin Yang. I'm the one who's dragged you into this mess. I'm terribly sorry. Don't worry, I'll protect you. If worst comes to worst, we brothers will live and die together. Lei Dongtian was speaking from the bottom of his heart. There was no falsehood in his words. Brother Lei. Yin Yang was touched. Brother Yun. Lei Dongtian was touched. In the room. Through the window, Old Moo looked at the two people in the snow outside. His heart was filled with emotions. In such a world, there are still such sincere brotherly feelings. It is really rare. Young Lord's trip to meet Yun Yang this time, be it in terms of cultivation base, practice or friendship, it's all worth it. Baishua looked at the two men in the snow outside through the window, his heart filled with emotions. My young master is really a genius. He's a natural-born, legendary liar. A peerless, super-duper trickster. An unprecedented, textbook acting master. A peerless scoundrel. An unprecedented, fantastical weirdo. Brother Lei, I do have something that I need your help with. What is it? Say it. As long as I can do it, I won't say a word. Seeing that the war is coming, the medicinal pills and medicine on my side. Yin Yang found it difficult to speak his mind. I hope Brother Lei can help me prepare for a rainy day. That's what I should do. Lei Dongtian laughed heartily and said, speaking of which, it's my fault. Why did I trouble you to ask for it? You deserve to be punished. Take them out now. He wiped his finger on the ring and said, 30 portions. Is it enough? Yin Yang said, it would be better if there were more. Although the abilities of my subordinates are not at the top, they are loyal and have nothing to worry about. I believe it will be more beneficial to this battle with more life-saving assets. Lei Dongtian laughed and said, then I'll round it up to 100 portions. Here are 10 bottles of medicinal pills for internal injuries and 10 bottles of medicinal pills for external injuries. Each bottle contains 10 pills. Here are 100 portions of medicine for external use and 100 portions of medicine specifically for injuries to bones and tendons. Thank you so much. Yin Yang looked grateful. Brother, you're willing to put yourself in danger for me. It's just medicine, it's not worth mentioning. Lei Dongtian was very emotional. Yin Yang kept all the medicine into the ring and said worriedly, Brother Lei, you've given me so many of the best medicine. What about you, Brother Lei? It's not that this young brother doesn't believe in Brother Lei's ability, it's just that weapons are blind. Lei Dongtian said comfortingly, don't worry, I still have 20 portions here. It's enough for us. Then, he said proudly, it won't be so easy for them to hurt me, then I'm really relieved. Yin Yang said with a relieved expression. In the room. Baishua's expression was extremely contorted. The other party only had a total of 120 portions of the best medicine, but Yin Yang had conned 100 of them out. This could no longer be described as generous. He had given most of them to Yin Yang and kept only a little for himself. Baishua absolutely believed that if Yin Yang were to sell Lei Dongtian now, Lei Dongtian would gladly help to raise the price and count the money for him. This point was already an indisputable fact. Brother Lei. Brother, if you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to hide between us brothers, just say it. It's like this. This young brother has a lot of things that I don't understand in cultivation. My brother is an expert in cultivation, I wonder, say it, if there's anything you don't understand, just say it. I'll answer your questions. It's not an exaggeration to say that I'm really an expert in this regard. I know much more than you, brother. Cultivation can't be fake. After a long, long time. Brother Lei. Speak, brother. This young brother has consumed 3 cinnabar fruits yesterday and I feel that I've benefited a lot. However, I still feel that it's a little difficult to digest the medicinal strength and make it my own. It probably needs a catalyzing process. If Brother Lei is free, could you help this young brother train? To speed up the process of absorbing the medicinal strength. Time was tight, so Yin Yang kept on making requests based on the principle of taking advantage of the situation as soon as possible. Ha ha ha, I've really neglected this. I should be the one helping you train. The sooner you absorb the medicinal strength, the more you'll have to protect yourself. It's decided then, brother, I'll train with you. Don't worry, brother, you don't have to worry about your realm being unstable. I'll control my strength precisely and condense the whole process into a day and a half. As long as you can withstand it mentally, I can completely solidify your cultivation base and integrate the 100 years of cultivation base into your body. That's great. In the following day and a half, Lei Dongtian and Yun Yang were always together, either sparring or training. They were closer than Siamese twins. Lei Dongtian carried out what he had said strictly, controlling the strength of his training. It was just right, not a little more or less. He kept it above the threshold that Yun Yang could withstand and continued to train. Brother, you're really a genius. I've surpassed you by a whole level and yet I can't completely suppress you. Let me try when I increase my combat strength by 1.5 levels. 1.5 levels is actually not your limit. Brother Yun, your combat strength is really amazing. 2.5 levels. Hiss. Brother, it's the first time I've seen a genius like you with such combat awareness. A cultivation base that's 3 levels higher than your limit is actually only about to reach your threshold. In terms of combat awareness, Brother Yun, you're definitely the best among the younger generation that I've ever seen. Brother Lei, you're too kind. I'm ashamed. It's still the same saying. There's no falsehood in cultivation. Yes means yes, no means no. There's no exaggeration. Lei Dongtian's voice was solemn. Yin Yang sighed, it's a pity that this young brother's physique is too mixed after all. No matter how hard I train myself, I'll still feel inferior in front of a true genius. Besides, my current state will only make others jealous. If I'm not careful, I'll get myself killed. Lei Dongtian was initially jealous, but after hearing Yun Yang's words, he felt that he had been too petty and could not help feeling sad for Yun Yang. Don't be discouraged, brother. There's nothing that can't be done as long as you work hard enough. Diligence can make up for one's shortcomings, that's the truth of cultivation. Yun Yang was still sighing. Lei Dongtian continued to encourage him, don't think about these unhappy things. Come, let this elder brother feed you some moves. Come, work harder. In my eyes, younger brother Yun is a top-notch genius, not a disheartened coward. When your stamina is on the brink of collapse, you must persevere. Continue, persevere. Persevere. Chapter 352. During this day and night, Lei Dongtian was definitely a good teacher. Lei Dongtian was definitely a good teacher, and a textbook one at that. Under his relentless training, the 100 years of cultivation base that Yun Yang had obtained was being consolidated and solidified at a flying speed. It was fully integrated into his body and turned into his actual combat power. Yun Yang's cultivation base had broken through twice during this period. The 100 years of cultivation base that he had obtained from consuming the scarlet fruit could have allowed Yun Yang to break through immediately. However, Yun Yang had suppressed his cultivation base to the 8th peak pinnacle with Emmy's help. However, under such a unique cultivation atmosphere and the continuous high-pressure battle, every time he felt that he had reached the tipping point, Yun Yang and Emmy would work together to suppress his cultivation base internally while Lei Dongtian would assist him in the external training. After successfully suppressing his cultivation base, he would continue to train and suppress again and again. After 7 to 8 times, Yun Yang's cultivation base had been forced to the 8th peak pinnacle limit. There was no more room for improvement. Yun Yang was ready. He had broken through to the 9th peak. After a dozen similar repetitions, he had successfully broken through to the 10th peak. This was the limit that Tianxian continent's cultivators knew, the ultimate realm that could not be reached by those who were not at the pinnacle of the world. However, to Yun Yang, this was only a checkpoint, the starting point of a brand new cultivation base. Lei Dongtian, who understood the importance of this checkpoint, used a spurt of energy to force Yun Yang to continue breaking through and training. For the entire night, he did not stop at all. Finally, at dawn, Yun Yang felt that his exhausted body had suddenly become light. The impurities in his body had automatically evaporated at this moment. Even his head, which had been dizzy from the lust, had regained its clarity. His every movement was smooth, and he could do as he pleased. Even the power of his divine sense had suddenly skyrocketed by 10 times. All of these were evident. Yin-Yang had finally entered a new realm of cultivation, the true mystical Qi heaven realm. The first heaven of the heaven realm. Lei Dongtian had been suppressing Yin-Yang's tipping point, helping him to strengthen his foundation and pushing him forward, all the way to the pinnacle of the mystical Qi heaven realm. The scarlet fruit's effect had finally come to an end. However, Yin-Yang's improvement in one day and night was no different from reaching heaven in a single bound. Yin-Yang, who had advanced to the first heaven of the heaven realm, had indeed ascended to heaven. Yin-Yang, who had advanced from the peak realm to the heaven realm, had not ascended to heaven as well. It had only been a day, but Yin-Yang's cultivation base and combat power were like two different people. When he stopped, even Yin-Yang could not believe it himself. He could not believe that he could soar to such a height in just one night without Emmy's mystical power. Old Mu watched the events of the night from the window and sighed in his heart. Young Master had indeed developed a true brotherly bond with Yin-Yang. Throughout the night, he had helped Yin-Yang with breakthroughs with all his might. Even his young master could not break through so many bottlenecks and limits in a row when he was breaking through back then, yet he had done it for Yin-Yang. Even when young master broke through back then, there were regrets and flaws left behind due to certain factors. Here, he had actually helped Yin-Yang avoid, overcome, and replenish all of them. Sai, young lord, has never been so dedicated to his father. He and Yin-Yang really hit it off. Fortunately, this fate was not an ill-fated one. It was fortunate that Yin-Yang was not a woman. Fortunately, the young master didn't have a homosexual fetish or a homosexual fetish. It was fortunate. Both of them stayed together for a day and a night, a whole day and a night. Even someone as strong as Lei Dongtian was exhausted, feeling as if his body had been hollowed out. However, Yin-Yang was still in high spirits and his condition was unprecedentedly good. His face was glowing. It was exhilarating. He was in high spirits. Brother Yun, you're a little monster. Lei Dongtian panted, his face pale. He felt that this day and night was no different from going through inhuman torture. How could this be? He was the one who took the initiative and presided over the development of the situation. Why was it that when he was exhausted, Yin-Yang was still full of energy and in such a good state? Lei Dongtian had never thought that, as a Dao realm expert, he would one day be exhausted just to help an ant in the mountain realm level up. This was simply unimaginable and unbelievable. With the endless power of a Dao realm expert, Lei Dongtian felt that he could push through a mere peak realm cultivator's breakthrough in one go even if he used mystical Qi to push it. However, the truth was not like that. Yin-Yang's tenacity and ruthlessness surprised Lei Dongtian as well. It was horrifying. Yin-Yang kept asking for advice and sparring with him, allowing Lei Dongtian to fuse his combat skills and mystical Qi in a high-pressure manner. Yin-Yang could use each of Lei Dongtian's words with ease and could even draw inferences from them. Not only was he able to use them freely, but he could also innovate and perform a more exciting performance. From the beginning to the end, Lei Dongtian did not have to worry that Yin-Yang could not comprehend it. He was like a dry sponge that was about to melt, thirstily absorbing all the knowledge that Lei Dongtian said. Any combination of mystical Qi and combat skills, any experience in breaking through to the next realm, everything, when he was advancing from the 8th peak to the 9th peak, Lei Dongtian had only given him a reminder, but Yin-Yang had immediately used the logic contained in this sentence to push his mystical Qi to the most suitable tipping point for the breakthrough. After a round of sparring, Yin-Yang broke through in the midst of the battle smoothly and without any hindrance. He had even counterattacked immediately after the breakthrough, attacking Lei Dongtian forcefully. In the process of counterattacking and sparring, he had slowly tempered his mystical Qi cultivation base that had just broken through and unleashed the remaining medicinal power of the scarlet fruit bit by bit, fully utilizing it without leaving anything out. Compared to Yin-Yang's natural and logical progress, Lei Dongtian was more miserable. On one hand, he had to control his strength and aura to avoid hurting Yun-Yang by mistake. On the other hand, he had to accurately maintain the rhythm of Yun-Yang's ability and continue to be the most competent sparring partner. Of course, the feeling of maintaining such a state was not negative, but it was pleasurable. He was witnessing a person who had a superhuman level of comprehension in learning every word that he said. Every rhythm was at an extreme speed. For Lei Dongtian, the person involved, there was no doubt about the sense of achievement. Therefore, Lei Dongtian unknowingly followed Yun-Yang's rhythm and continued all the way. Then, he really witnessed the birth of a miracle. In one day and one night, the 100 years of cultivation base provided by the 3 scarlet fruits had allowed a person to break through from the 8th heaven of mystical qi to the pinnacle of the 1st heaven realm. It was even to the extent that he still had strength to spare, that there was still room for him to spare. Lei Dongtian could not help but feel the urge to take him in as a disciple. Teaching someone could actually be so joyful, so comfortable. All of this is thanks to Brother Lei's careful teaching. This young brother here sincerely thanks you. Yun-Yang smiled embarrassedly. Lei Dongtian looked at Yun-Yang with a complicated gaze. After everything was over, he realized that other than his cultivation base that was still much higher than Yun-Yang's, there was nothing else he could teach Yun-Yang. Yun-Yang had already emptied himself in this short span of a day, leaving nothing behind. Lei Dongtian, who was still lamenting that his body had been emptied, suddenly had an uncontrollable evil thought. If such a genius were to grow up, his brilliance would inevitably be suppressed. With Yun-Yang in this world, would there still be a time for him, Lei Dongtian? Then, should he kill him in advance and nip the problem in the bud? However, this thought was immediately suppressed by Lei Dongtian. He would think about it in the future. Not to mention that Yun-Yang was still of use, he had invested a lot in him, so he could not simply destroy him. In addition, he had built a deep brotherhood with Yun-Yang and the cauldron of 7 emotions was already in shape. How could he let him die before it was time for cultivation? Forget it. The better he treated Yun-Yang, the more Yun-Yang would appreciate him and the more intense the backlash of the 7 emotions would be. The higher Yun-Yang's cultivation base was, the greater the power of primordial yang that he could obtain when he succeeded. The benefits would always belong to him. Why should he be so hasty and let everything go out of control? Yun-Yang was sensitive enough to sense the viciousness in Lei Dongtian's eyes. Indeed, he's just a popinjay who hasn't gone through any hardships. Of course, he's scheming, but that's all he's capable of. Yun-Yang commented faintly in his heart. If he was a person with deep thoughts, he would have either avoided the important points when he asked those questions or answered briefly. He would not have been led into the gutter by his words. Even if he had been led into the rhythm on a whim, he would not have shown his jealousy and malice so obviously after he had taught Yun-Yang everything he knew. Lei Dongtian did not do either of these things. Such a character was truly unworthy of praise. In Yun-Yang's eyes, such an ace cultivator had nothing else to recommend other than his extremely high cultivation base. What a pity. With so many resources and Brother Lei's unsparing help, I can only advance to the 1st level of the heaven realm. Yun-Yang sighed and said, I thought that 100 years of cultivation base could directly elevate me to the 4th or 5th level of the heaven realm. Lei Dongtian's train of thought was immediately diverted. He said, You wish. If the medicinal power of the 3 cinnabar fruits were completely used to elevate one's cultivation base and blindly pursue a breakthrough, it's not impossible to forcefully push one to the 4th or 5th level of the heaven realm. However, blindly elevating one's realm will inevitably lead to the loss of a stable foundation. If one's foundation is not stable, the cultivation journey will be difficult. This is the simplest logic. Elevating one's foundation thoroughly like yours is the true meaning of elevation. There are no hidden dangers, only beneficial elevation. The advantages of the two are obvious. Lei Dongtian snorted, Do you still not understand? More intuitively, using sand and mud can also be used to build a house. However, using such a material to build a house or using green steel and white jade as a foundation, which one is better? Which one can last longer? Even if the latter can't withstand the wind and rain for the time being, it's still better than the former that can't be maintained and will collapse overnight. I see. Yin Yang smiled brightly. Brother Lei knows so much. Your words are right on target. It's much better than what I've set my sights on. Lei Dongtian lectured, Brother Yun, you must remember that no matter what it is, you must first lay a solid foundation. Otherwise, it'll be too late to regret it. Yin Yang accepted the advice wholeheartedly. Old Mu, who was by the window, sighed. Young lord, you're right. However, Yin Yang's foundation is incomparably solid. Instead, it's you who haven't done it. What you've said, you haven't done it at all. Today is the birthday of Zi Shu, Zhang Tian, Superman, and World War II. Let us wish these three fellows a happy birthday. Together forever. Together. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.